The first wound of the evening was not the Duke's betrayal, but the way he entered Carrington House, and looked past his bride, as if she were already a widow to his attention. London, 1816, had gathered beneath the chandeliers to celebrate the engagement of His Grace Adrian Winslow, Duke of Carrington, to Lady Beatrice Vale, daughter of Edmund Vale, Earl of Vale. Every candle burned as if wealth itself had been set aflame. Every silk skirt whispered across the polished floor with the soft menace of judgment. Mothers watched daughters. Fathers watched fortunes. Young ladies watched the door because a duke, even an engaged one, remained a symbol society could not stop worshipping. Beatrice stood near the center of the ballroom, because that was where a future duchess belonged, though she had never felt more like a woman placed where others might approve the arrangement and forget the person. Her ivory gown had been selected by her father for what he called quiet distinction. That meant it flattered his ambitions more than her complexion. The pearls at her ears had belonged to her mother, and in her dark hair rested the comb she had nearly lacked the courage to wear, a delicate fan of pearls set in gold, beautiful except for the fine crack running through the largest pearl. Her mother had once fastened it there with warm fingers and said, "A lady may be gentle without becoming invisible." Tonight, Beatrice feared invisibility had won. "Smile," Lord Vale murmured beside her, not looking at her. "Half the room is watching." Beatrice adjusted the angle of her fan. "I'm aware, father." "Then look grateful." "I'm aware of that as well." His jaw tightened, but he did not rebuke her aloud. There were too many ears nearby, and Lord Vale loved propriety most when it protected him from being understood. For 6 months, he had praised the Carrington alliance as the redemption of their house. A daughter's happiness had been treated as an ornament that might be added later if money permitted. A duke was security. A duchess's title was honor. A marriage settlement was peace. No one had said love, and after a time, Beatrice had stopped listening for it. The Dowager Duchess of Carrington stood near the mantel beneath a portrait of her late husband, her silver hair arranged with careful dignity, and her face composed in the tired manner of a woman who had spent years defending a son from his own impulses. She had been kind to Beatrice in the correct way, never cruel, never warm enough to be called tender. That evening, however, the dowager's gaze moved often to the doors, and each time it returned with a deeper line between her brows. She knew something, or feared something. Beatrice noticed because she had made a life of noticing what others concealed. Lady Octavia Fenwick, who wore black feathers in her hair, as though she expected to preside over a funeral, leaned toward 2 matrons near the musicians. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "A safe bride, at least. Carrington is wise to choose a woman who will not trouble him with imagination." One lady gave a breath of laughter. Another hid her smile behind a fan. Beatrice heard. She always heard. Society's insults rarely arrived with the honesty of a slap. They came wrapped in wit, concern, or good breeding. A woman was not called unwanted. She was called sensible. She was not called dull. She was called safe. She was not unloved. She was fortunate. Beatrice kept her chin level and allowed no expression to answer them. That too was something her father had trained into her. Stillness. Silence. The art of looking unhurt so others might continue wounding without embarrassment. The footman at the far doors straightened. A ripple passed through the ballroom, first through the young women, then their mothers, then the men who pretended not to care. Adrian had arrived. Beatrice felt the room rearrange before she saw him. It was astonishing how little a duke had to do to command air. Adrian paused beneath the archway, in black evening dress and a white waistcoat, his fair hair brushed back from a face whose beauty had been forgiven too often. He looked composed, almost radiant, and for a treacherous heartbeat, Beatrice hoped that perhaps the distance between them had been shyness, not indifference. Perhaps tonight, before witnesses, he would look at her as a bride rather than a duty. The guests made a path from the door to Beatrice. Adrian did not take it. His eyes passed over his mother, then over Beatrice, with no more warmth than candlelight crossing a window. They settled beyond her left shoulder, near the gilded arch that led toward the card-room. Beatrice did not turn at once. The sudden hush behind her told her there was something to see. Only then did she follow his gaze. Miss Seraphina Rowe stood beneath the archway in scarlet silk. She should not have been there, not at a ball arranged to honor another woman's engagement. Not without a recognized chaperone near enough to shield her reputation. Not in a color chosen to be seen from every corner of the room. Yet she stood calmly, her dark curls arranged with deliberate softness, her mouth trembling just enough to appear vulnerable, and a painted fan resting against one wrist. Beatrice's eyes caught the fan before she could stop herself. Its ivory ribs bore a small gold crest. Carrington, a gift then, not rumor, not passing weakness, a claim displayed like jewelry. Good heavens, someone whispered. Miss Rowe? Surely not tonight. How unfortunate for Lady Beatrice. Or fortunate, if she has sense enough to see what he is. That last voice held pity sharpened into pleasure. Beatrice felt the words strike and fall away. She would examine the bruise later, when she could afford to bend. Lord Vale's fingers tightened around his snuff-box. Do not move. I have not moved. Do not speak. I have had practice. His eyes cut toward her. This is not the hour for cleverness. No, she said softly. It appears to be the hour for spectacle. Across the room, the Dowager Duchess had gone pale. She took one step toward Adrian, then stopped, because a mother may command a child in a nursery, but not a duke in his own ballroom before all London. Her hand closed over the back of a chair. Beatrice saw shame there, real shame. It did not save her, but it proved she was not imagining the blade. Adrian crossed the room at last, but not toward his bride. He moved toward Seraphina, with a purpose he had never shown during his calls at Vale House. Seraphina lowered her eyes as he approached. The gesture was modest. The timing was theatrical. A whisper spread like spilled ink. Beatrice stood in ivory beneath the chandeliers, while the woman in scarlet became the only color anyone could see. The pearl comb pressed against her scalp. Its cracked center felt heavier than gold had any right to feel. Then, from the opposite side of the ballroom, she became aware of another gaze. His Grace Lucian Harrow, Duke of Wycliffe, stood apart from the hungry clusters of guests. He was darker than Adrian, not merely in hair and dress, but in the controlled gravity of his presence. Society called him cold, because he did not waste warmth on performance. Men called him difficult, because he remembered debts and lies with equal precision. Beatrice had seen him only twice before, both times at crowded assemblies where he spoke little and seemed to know too much. He was not watching Seraphina. He was watching Beatrice, not with pity. Pity would have undone her, not with amusement. That would have made him cruel. He looked at her, as if he had seen the shape of the injury before the room had finished admiring the knife. The attention struck her more deeply than the whispers. For 1 second, her fan lowered. Lucian noticed the movement. His gaze dropped to her hand, then returned to her face. Nothing in his expression softened, yet something in the steadiness of his regard said, I see this, I know it is wrong. Beatrice lifted her fan again, the moment closed. Near the center of the floor, Adrian took Seraphina's gloved hand. The gesture was small. The room understood it instantly. The Dowager Duchess whispered, Adrian, don't. He did not look at her. Seraphina's lashes lifted, and though her lips trembled, triumph passed through her eyes, quick and bright. Beatrice saw it. So did Lucian's. Lady Octavia saw it, and smiled behind her fan. The orchestra played on for 3 more measures, because musicians, like women, were trained to continue until a man of rank told them to stop. Then Adrian raised his free hand. The conductor faltered. Violins died in the middle of a phrase. Conversation collapsed after them. Silence spread across Carrington House, polished, public, and merciless. Beatrice stood with her, cracked pearl comb in her hair, her father rigid beside her, the Dowager Duchess frozen near the mantel, and every guest waiting to learn whether she would become an object of pity, blame, or entertainment. Adrian turned at last. His eyes found Beatrice, because there was nowhere else for cowardice to look. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying too clearly beneath the chandeliers. "There's something I must say before this evening goes any further." The ballroom waited with the obedience that rank could purchase, but honor could not deserve. Adrian stood beneath the chandeliers, with Seraphina Rowe's gloved hand still held in his own, and Beatrice understood, with a clarity so cold it almost steadied her, that the silence had not been created for truth. It had been arranged for spectacle. Every face turned toward him, yet every judgment pressed against her skin. The discarded woman was always asked to stand still, while the man explained why his cruelty was really courage. Adrian drew a breath. This engagement was entered into, with respect for both families, and with every proper intention. The words were polished enough to make the wound look ceremonial. A murmur moved along the walls. The Dowager Duchess of Carrington took one step forward. "Adrian," she said, low and warning, "do not." He did not turn to her. That, somehow, struck Beatrice more sharply than if he had shouted. A son could ignore his mother in public, only when he believed the room already belonged to him. "Lady Beatrice Vale has conducted herself with admirable dignity," he continued. "No fault can be laid at her door." There it was. The first generous phrase offered like a veil over a blade. No fault, as though London had gathered not to witness his betrayal, but to judge whether she had earned it. Beatrice heard fans stir. Sympathy bloomed around her, damp and poisonous. "Poor girl," someone whispered. "He means to release her. Release her. Before all of us, perhaps he discovered something lacking." That last sentence reached Beatrice with perfect precision. Society had never needed proof to blame a woman. It required only a man willing to wound her, and enough witnesses to make the wound interesting. Lord Vale's hand closed around his snuff-box so tightly that his knuckles whitened. "Stand still," he breathed. "Say nothing." Beatrice did not look at him. "I'm doing both. For once, do them better." Across the room, Lucian Harrow's gaze sharpened. He had heard enough to understand the command beneath the whisper. He did not move, not yet. The stillness of him was not indifference. It was restraint held on a very short chain. Adrian lifted Seraphina's hand a fraction higher, and the room saw the gesture because he wished them to see it. "But I cannot, in honor, bind myself to a marriage where my heart is not engaged. Such a union would be unjust to Lady Beatrice, unjust to myself, and unjust to the woman I have long loved." Seraphina lowered her eyes. Her shoulders trembled with exquisite timing. "Adrian," she whispered, just loudly enough for the nearest guests to catch the tenderness of it. "Please, don't make this harder. I should have done this sooner," he said. Beatrice watched him say it, and realized that he believed himself brave. That was the true obscenity of the moment. Not the mistress, not the broken engagement, the self-admiration. Adrian had taken her dignity, placed it before a room full of witnesses, and expected to be praised for confessing that he preferred another woman. The Dowager Duchess turned pale enough that one of her companions reached for her arm. Lady Octavia Fenwick hid a smile behind her black fan. Seraphina leaned closer to Adrian, not enough to be indecorous, only enough to make the arrangement unmistakable. Scarlet beside black, desire beside duty. A living painting of Beatrice's replacement. Adrian finally looked at Beatrice. "Lady Beatrice, I never wished to wound you." Her throat tightened, not from tears. Tears would have been easier. It tightened because every eye in the ballroom had turned upon her, demanding a performance. Weep, and they would call her weak. Rage, and they would call her vulgar. Forgive too quickly, and they would call her cold. Beatrice held her fan at her waist and met his gaze. "Your Grace," she said, "you have chosen an unusually crowded place to avoid wounding me." The silence changed. A few guests drew breath. Seraphina's lashes lifted. Adrian's expression tightened, not with remorse, but with surprise that the object of his speech had become a speaker. "This is not what I intended." "That may be true," Beatrice said. "Intentions are often smaller than consequences." Lord Vale hissed. "Beatrice," she ignored him. The act felt like stepping from a ledge and discovering that the air for 1 second would hold her. Adrian's mouth thinned. I am trying to act honorably. No, Beatrice said softly. You are trying to place honor's name upon desire, so that it may enter society by the front door. A ripple went through the ballroom, then was quickly smothered. The Dowager Duchess closed her eyes. Lady Octavia's fan stopped moving. Seraphina's face remained sorrowful, but her fingers tightened around Adrian's hand. Beatrice saw it, so did Lucian. Adrian's color rose. You mistake me. I believe I have done that for 6 months. The words came out calm and exact. Their calmness gave them weight. Adrian stared as if he had expected a wound and found a mirror. Seraphina stepped forward then, wearing pity as gracefully as scarlet silk. Lady Beatrice, I know you must despise me. I don't blame you. Love makes us all helpless before it. Beatrice turned to her. Up close, Seraphina looked less fragile. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was not softness that held the room. It was calculation dressed as softness. The fan with the Carrington crest rested against her wrist like a signature. How convenient, Beatrice said. That helplessness brought you to precisely the right doorway, at precisely the right moment. Seraphina flinched. A lovely flinch, a practiced one. Lady Octavia leaned toward the woman beside her and murmured something that made 2 fans rise at once. Beatrice saw, in the corner of her eye, Seraphina's fan close and open once. Lady Octavia answered by touching the black feathers in her hair. It was swift, almost invisible, a signal, or the memory of one. Lucian's gaze moved from Seraphina to Lady Octavia, and his face became very still. The stillness frightened Beatrice, less than it should have. It felt like a door being locked against a storm. Adrian stepped toward Beatrice. I will ensure no blame attaches to you. You cannot throw a woman into a river and then promise she will not be blamed for being wet. The sentence landed with a force she had not intended. Somewhere near the musicians, a young lady made a small sound and was silenced by her mother. Lord Vale moved closer, his voice low and sharp. You will stop this at once. Beatrice looked at the footman, standing nearby with a silver tray of untouched champagne glasses. The poor young man had gone rigid with terror, as if scandal might stain livery. May I trouble you, she asked. He blinked, then stepped forward. My lady, the tray. His hand shook as he offered it. Beatrice looked down at the engagement ring on her left hand. Adrian had placed it there without warmth, and she had worn it without illusion. Still gold had a way of pretending permanence. She pulled once. The ring caught at her knuckle. The room watched the small resistance as if it were a battle. She pulled again, more slowly. It slipped free. For one heartbeat, she saw her finger bare, marked by the pale circle of an expectation that had never belonged to her. Then she set the ring on the tray. The sound was tiny. It ended the engagement more completely than Adrian's speech had done. Then I release your grace, she said, before the witnesses you preferred. The footman nearly bowed over the tray from sheer panic. No one laughed. Adrian looked at the ring as though it had accused him. Seraphina's lips parted. The Dowager Duchess whispered, Oh, Beatrice, there was real grief in it, but Beatrice could not receive grief from a house that had just watched her be offered to ruin. She stepped back. One pin in her hair loosened, then another. The pearl comb shifted. She reached too late. It fell from her hair and struck the polished floor with a brittle sound that seemed louder than the Duke's entire confession. A few pearls trembled in their settings. The crack through the central pearl widened. Beatrice's breath caught, not for Adrian, not for the ring. For that small broken thing her mother had once touched. The ache of it nearly broke through her composure. Before any curious guest could stoop, a black sleeve entered her vision. Lucian Harrow bent and lifted the comb from the floor with unexpected care. He did not rush. He did not display it. He held it as if damaged things deserved more dignity, not less. When he straightened, the room seemed to remember that he was a duke and made space around him. Lady Beatrice, he said. His voice was low, but everyone strained to hear it. I believe this belongs to you. She extended her hand. He placed the comb in her palm. Their gloves touched for less than a second. Nothing improper passed between them. Nothing that society could name. Yet the restraint of the gesture steadied her more than any embrace could have done. "Thank you, Your Grace. No thanks are required." He stepped aside, and the people nearest him moved without being told. A path opened toward the doors. That was when Beatrice understood the shape of his protection. He was not taking her away. He was making it possible for her to leave without being chased by hands, questions, or pity. She closed her fingers around the broken comb and walked. The whispers followed. Poor thing, proud thing, fortunate thing, ruined thing. None of the words stopped her. At the ballroom threshold, she heard Adrian say her name once, too late and too softly to matter. She did not turn. That, she knew, would wound him more than tears. The corridor beyond the ballroom was cooler, lined with portraits of Carrington ancestors, who had surely survived scandals by forcing women to keep quiet about them. Beatrice had taken no more than 5 steps before Lord Vale caught up with her. His face had lost all public polish. "You foolish girl," he said, his voice cutting low through the marble hall. "You will go back in there and beg him to reconsider." The corridor beyond the ballroom felt colder than the street outside. Though Carrington House had been built to keep winter, poverty, and consequence at a polite distance. Marble gleamed beneath the lamps. Portraits of long-dead Winslows watched from gilded frames with the smug patience of people whose names had survived every sin committed beneath them. Behind the closed doors, the ballroom remained too quiet. Beatrice could almost hear London deciding what she would be by morning. Proud, ruined, unfortunate, difficult, never simply wronged. Lord Vale stood between her and the front hall, his face stripped of the public dignity he valued more than truth. "You will go back in there and beg him to reconsider," he said again. The words were softer this time, which made them worse. He was not pleading. He was calculating. Beatrice held the cracked pearl comb in her gloved palm. The broken edge pressed into the fabric, a small honest pain. "No." Lord Vale stared at her as if the word had been spoken in a foreign tongue. "No, father." His nostrils flared. "You are overwrought. I'm clear enough to know I won't beg a man who chose my humiliation as his stage. Do not make yourself dramatic. Carrington has behaved foolishly, but foolishness can be managed. Men lose their heads over women like Miss Rowe. A sensible wife learns to survive such things." Beatrice looked at him then. Not as a child, not as the daughter who had spent years trying to win warmth by being convenient. As a woman finally hearing the full poverty of what he believed she deserved. "I am not his wife. You were meant to be, and now I am meant to be silent. You are meant to be prudent." The word landed heavily. Prudence had been Lord Vale's favorite name for every door he closed. Prudence when he dismissed her music master. Prudence when he sold her mother's carriage. Prudence when he accepted Carrington's courtship without asking whether Adrian had ever spoken to her with tenderness. "Prudence," she said, "appears to ask a great deal of women and very little of men." His eyes sharpened. "Do not begin thinking yourself clever because a room full of fools enjoyed your little performance. I did not perform. I refused. You embarrassed me. There it was. Not you were wounded. Not my child. Not come home. You embarrassed me." Beatrice felt something inside her settle into place with the quiet click of a lock. "Then we are both disappointed tonight." Lord Vale stepped closer, lowering his voice, as a footman passed at the far end of the corridor, and immediately pretended not to see them. "Listen carefully. The Carrington alliance is not a ribbon one drops because one's feelings are bruised. There are obligations attached, settlements, expectations. Matters you do not understand. Debts." The word left her before she had fully chosen it. Lord Vale went still, not for long, only a heartbeat. It was enough. Beatrice felt the shape of the truth before she knew its details. The engagement had not been merely ambition. It had been rescue, not hers, his. "How much?" she asked. "That is not your concern. It was to be my marriage. It was to be your duty. Duty is what people call sacrifice when they expect someone else to bleed." His face darkened. "Your mother would be ashamed of this tone." The blow found its mark, but not as he intended. Beatrice looked down at the cracked comb. at the pearl her mother had once touched with such care. "My mother taught me gentleness," she said. "You mistook that for permission." The corridor changed around them. Perhaps only inside Beatrice. Perhaps not. A door opened nearby, releasing a flicker of voices from some smaller sitting room. The voices stopped when the occupant saw her. The door closed again. Society did not need to crowd a hallway to stare. Lord Vale drew himself up, regaining his aristocratic mask by inches. "You will come with me now. Tomorrow, when sense returns, we will speak with the Dowager Duchess. Carrington may be brought to acknowledge his error. He did not make an error. He made a choice. Then you will make a wiser one. I am making it. You have no carriage. I will hire one. At this hour, dressed like that." After leaving that room, his laugh was short and without humor. "Do not be absurd. Absurdity seems to be the fashion of the house." Another voice entered the corridor, calm enough to cut without raising itself. "Then Lady Beatrice is only observing local custom." Lord Vale turned sharply. Beatrice did not need to look to know who had spoken. The air had changed. Footmen straightened. Even the closed doors seemed to listen. Lucian Harrow, Duke of Wycliffe, stood several paces away, his black evening coat severe against the pale marble, his expression unreadable. He was far enough to preserve propriety, near enough to have heard. Lord Vale's mouth tightened. "Your Grace. This is a private family matter." Lucian's gaze moved once from Lord Vale's face to Beatrice's hand, closed around the broken comb. Most public injuries become private family matters the moment a woman declines to suffer quietly. "You overstep." "Possibly." Lucian's voice remained even. "I find coercion the more pressing discourtesy." The word struck cleanly. Lord Vale glanced toward the servants, then back. "You choose dangerous language. I choose accurate language." Beatrice watched him, startled not by his intervention, but by its shape. He did not ask whether she wished to be saved. He did not announce himself as champion. He simply named what was happening, and let the name stand where her father had tried to hide it. Lord Vale's temper strained against his breeding. "My daughter is distressed. She does not know what she wants." Lucian looked at Beatrice, only at Beatrice. "Do you wish to return to the ballroom?" "No." "Do you wish to leave with Lord Vale?" Her father inhaled sharply. The answer cost her more than the first. It cut through years of obedience, through rooms where his approval had been the only weather she was allowed to study. "No." Lucian inclined his head. "Then where do you wish to go?" For a moment, the question left her blank. Not because there was no answer, but because choice, when offered without a trap inside it, felt almost unrecognizable. Beatrice looked toward the front doors. Beyond them lay Mayfair at night, wet stones, carriage lamps, cold air, and consequence. "Away from this house," she said. "Alone if necessary." "It is not necessary. My carriage waits near Grosvenor Square. My aunt, Lady Maud Harrow, is inside it. She has a strict sense of propriety, and a worse opinion of this evening than I do." A strange breath moved through Beatrice. Not laughter, not relief. Something close enough to both that it hurt. Lord Vale stepped forward. "My daughter will not enter your carriage. Your daughter has refused yours. She is not in command of herself." Beatrice turned to him. "I am more in command now than when I was obeying you." The words seemed to remove color from his face. "You will regret this." "I have regretted obedience for longer." Silence followed. Even Lucian's eyes changed very slightly. The sentence had surprised him. It had surprised Beatrice too. Truth often sounded impossible until spoken aloud. Before Lord Vale could answer, a maid appeared at the bend of the corridor, carrying a small salver. She looked terrified, as if she had been sent to deliver a candle into a room full of powder. "Lady Beatrice Vale," she whispered. Lord Vale reached for the note. Beatrice took it first. The paper was unsealed, folded once, and scented with violets. She opened it beneath the lamp. The handwriting was elegant and slanted. "Before midnight, no one will remember you were ever his bride." There was no signature. None was needed. Seraphina's scent clung to the page like a smile behind a fan. The corridor seemed to narrow. Beatrice read the line once, then again. The words did not strike like insult alone. They struck like proof. This had not been a moment of love overwhelming restraint. It had been arranged, timed, delivered. Lucian's gaze lowered to the note, but he did not take it from her hand. "Miss Rowe writes with confidence," he said. Lord Vale snapped. "You cannot know who wrote that." Lucian did not look at him. "Lady Beatrice knows." Beatrice folded the note slowly. Her fingers had steadied. That interested her. Pain had shaken her. Evidence steadied her. "She sent this before I reached the doors." "Yes," Lucian said. "Then she expected me to leave, or intended you to be driven out," Lord Vale said. "This is nonsense. You are allowing hysteria to make a scandal worse." Beatrice looked at her father. "No. For the first time tonight, I am allowing evidence to make it clearer." His mouth closed. The maid still stood frozen with the empty salver. Beatrice turned to her. "Thank you. You may go." The girl fled with visible gratitude. Such a small courtesy. Such a relief to offer it when so much had been taken. Beatrice looked back toward the ballroom doors. Behind them, Serafina was likely receiving comfort for the pain she had scripted. Adrian was likely imagining himself tragic. London was likely deciding Beatrice's role without consulting her. "No more." She turned to Lucian. "You said your aunt is in your carriage." "Yes, and she is respectable." Aggressively. The corner of his mouth almost moved. "Then I would be grateful for her company." Lord Vale's voice hardened. "If you walk out with him, you force my hand." Beatrice held the cracked comb in one hand and Serafina's note in the other. The old life should have felt heavier. Instead, it felt thin as paper. "Your hand has been forced by debts, father. Mine has been freed by the truth." She walked past him. Lucian did not offer his arm until they reached the outer hall, and the front doors opened onto the damp London night. Even then, he paused. "May I?" Such a small question. Such a devastating kindness. Beatrice placed her gloved hand lightly on his sleeve. Outside, the air cooled her face. The street lamps burned through mist. Coachman looked, then looked away too late. Lucian guided her down the steps without hurry, shielding her from stares by possession rather than possession. At the carriage, he stopped before opening the door. "Lady Beatrice," he said, low enough for only her to hear, "there is a way to keep this scandal from burying you." Her fingers tightened around the violet-scented note. "At what price, Your Grace?" He looked toward Carrington House, then back at her. "The price is that you must know the truth before you choose anything at all." The carriage door opened upon darkness, lamplight, and a woman with a cane across her lap, who looked at Beatrice's torn composure, as if she had been expecting both scandal and weather. "Well," Lady Maud Harrow said, shifting the folds of her dark cloak, "either my nephew has rescued a lady or abducted one. I hope someone will tell me which before we reach the first corner." Lucian helped Beatrice into the carriage without tightening his hand over hers. The restraint registered through her shock. He did not pull, he made room. Then he entered opposite her and gave the coachman a quiet order. The door shut. Carrington House vanished behind glass, its lit windows blurring as the carriage rolled away from the street where her name had been broken for entertainment. Beatrice sat with the cracked pearl comb in one hand and Serafina's violet-scented note in the other. Her breathing had become too precise, as if each breath required permission. Lady Maud studied her for 1 second, then reached beneath the seat and drew out a folded shawl. "Put that around your shoulders, child. Dignity is admirable, but it is a poor defense against night air." "Thank you," Beatrice said, accepting it because refusing kindness would have been another form of obedience to pain. Lady Maud's eyes flicked to Lucian. "Now rescue or abduction?" "Neither," Lucian said. "Witness departure." "Ah, the most inconvenient category." Lady Maud turned back to Beatrice. "Did you choose this carriage?" "I chose not to enter my father's." That is often the beginning of a woman's education. Beatrice almost smiled, but the expression failed before it formed. The note in her hand seemed to breathe violets into the close space. She placed it on her lap and looked at Lucian. "You said I must know the truth before choosing anything." "Begin." Lady Maud's eyebrows rose. "Good. She has not fainted. Proceed carefully, Wycliffe, or I shall strike your ankle." Lucian did not look amused. His attention remained on Beatrice. 2 weeks ago, Lord Vale came to my solicitor through an intermediary. He inquired whether I would consider marriage to you if the Carrington arrangement failed. Beatrice felt the carriage turn, but the movement seemed distant. If it failed, yes, before tonight, yes. She looked down at the cracked pearl comb. The widened fracture caught a brief flash of street lamp. My father knew Adrian might abandon me. He suspected it, or feared it, or had been made to fear it. By whom? That is one of the questions. Do not answer me like a magistrate, your grace. Answer me like a man who just put me in his carriage. Lady Maud gave a soft sound of approval. Lucian accepted the rebuke without visible resentment. Very well. I believe Lord Vale knew Carrington was entangled with Miss Rowe. I also believe someone encouraged him to prepare a second arrangement before Carrington's public failure could destroy your value in the marriage market. Beatrice lifted her eyes slowly. My value, that is his word, not mine, yet you repeated it, because ugliness loses nothing by being named. She held his gaze. And you were to be the second arrangement, yes. The single word did not excuse itself. It entered the carriage and remained there, heavy and clean. Beatrice had expected denial, explanation, perhaps some gentlemanly phrase about honor. Instead, he gave her the truth so directly that it left her no place to hide from it. Did you accept? No, that is too simple. It is. He reached inside his coat and withdrew a folded packet tied with black ribbon. He did not hand it to her yet. Lord Vale pressed matters further than an inquiry. A special license was prepared through channels he had already set in motion. My name was included after I learned enough to understand that removing myself at once might drive him toward a worse bargain before you were warned. Beatrice stared at the packet. You allowed it. I allowed it to exist. That sounds like a distinction made by men who own desks. It may be. His face did not soften, but his voice lowered. I refuse to act upon it. I told Lord Vale through my solicitor that no marriage would proceed without your knowledge, your consent, and proper witnesses. I carried the papers tonight because I feared he might try to force your hand after Carrington failed. And he did. Yes, the carriage wheels hissed over damp stone. For a moment, only that sound filled the space between them. Beatrice thought of her father in the corridor, telling her to beg. She thought of Seraphina's note, sent before the ballroom air had cooled from Adrian's confession. She thought of Adrian raising Seraphina's hand and calling desire honor. Then she looked at Lucian, who sat with the license between them like a loaded truth. Why were you watching Carrington House at all? Lucian's gaze shifted briefly to Lady Maud. The older woman's expression hardened, not with surprise, but with recognition. Tell her all that is necessary, she said, not all that flatters you. Nothing flatters me in this, Lucian replied. He looked back at Beatrice. My family has an interest in certain debts connected to Carrington's circle. A promissory note came into my solicitor's hands. Carrington's name appears upon it. I have reason to believe it may be forged, or that its obligation has been used improperly. Lord Vale's name appears elsewhere, not openly, but through a guarantor. Your marriage to Carrington would have settled several pressures at once. Beatrice heard the sentence and understood it in pieces. Adrian's name, her father's debts, a forged note. Her marriage laid across the whole matter like linen over a stain. So I was not merely a bride. No. I was a curtain. Lucian's mouth tightened. That is one way to describe what they intended. They, Lord Vale, certainly, perhaps others. I do not yet know how far Miss Rowe understood the money, but her note suggests she understood the timing. Beatrice unfolded the violet-scented paper again. Before midnight, no one will remember you were ever his bride. The cruelty was no longer merely romantic. It was strategic. Seraphina had not wanted only Adrian's heart. She had wanted Beatrice erased quickly enough that no one would examine what had been arranged behind her. If you knew this, Beatrice said, why did you not warn me before tonight? That question changed him, not outwardly enough for strangers to see, but Beatrice saw the restraint become heavier. Because I had proof of danger. not proof of design. Because I underestimated how quickly Carrington would act. Because I believed any approach from me before the announcement might compromise you further. And because you are a duke accustomed to deciding when truth may be safely given. Lady Maud's cane touched the carriage floor once. Lucian looked down, then back at Beatrice. Yes, no defense, no wounded pride. The answer struck harder because it did not fight. Beatrice leaned back against the seat. The shawl slipped from one shoulder. She did not adjust it. You are asking me to believe the same papers my father prepared, without my consent, may now protect me. I am asking you to read them before deciding whether they protect or endanger you. He extended the packet at last. And I am asking you to believe nothing, because I say it. She took the packet. The ribbon was smooth beneath her gloves. For a moment, she did not open it. If my father sold the path, how do I know you did not buy it? Lady Maud grew very still. Lucian absorbed the question as if it deserved the pain it caused. You do not know. Not yet. Beatrice had not expected that answer. Most men would be offended. Most men would have less reason to be. Why would you marry me? To prevent Lord Vale from forcing you into the hands of a man who would use the scandal worse. That is protection, not marriage. Agreed then? Why? His gaze held hers, unflinching. Because, if you choose it with full knowledge, marriage to me tonight would make you Duchess of Wycliffe before morning. Society would still gossip, but it could not bury you as Carrington's rejected bride. Your father could not drag you home. Carrington could not retrieve you to ease his guilt. Miss Rowe could not erase you before midnight. The name would give you a door, not a cage, if the terms are written properly. Beatrice looked at the packet again. And if I refuse, then Lady Maud takes you wherever you wish within propriety. My carriage, her name, and my servants remain at your disposal until you are safe. Lady Maud nodded. I have terrorized greater households for less worthy causes. Beatrice opened the packet. The license lay within, along with a paper written in a firm hand. Terms. Not vows, not declarations, terms. Separate rooms, her own correspondence, her own allowance, access to an independent solicitor. No claim upon her mother's effects. No use of her name in any public action against Carrington without her permission. If, after 1 year, she desired separation of residence, a separate income would be secured without contest. Each line made her throat tightened in a different way. Not because it was romantic, because it assumed she had a will. You wrote these? She asked. Yes. Before tonight, after Lord Vale's inquiry, before Carrington's speech. So you expected this might happen. I feared you came to the ball to watch, to witness. There is a difference, though not a comforting one. Beatrice looked through the carriage window. London passed in fragments, iron railings, wet pavement. A shop sign swinging in the mist. A pair of men stepping aside as the ducal carriage moved through the street. Her old life was still behind her, bright with chandeliers and gossip. Ahead lay a chapel she had not chosen, with a man she did not love, carrying papers her father had begun without her consent. And yet, for the first time that night, the next step had been placed in her hands. Where are we going now? St. Anselm's chapel is near enough, Lucian said. The rector is a decent man. He was contacted earlier because of Lord Vale's pressure, but he has been instructed that nothing proceeds without your explicit consent. You instructed him? Lady Maud did. Lady Maud sniffed. Rectors listen better to old women with reputations for making scenes. Beatrice closed the packet. I will not be hurried into gratitude. I would distrust gratitude given under duress, Lucian said. I will not be used against Carrington because another duke finds it satisfying. Agreed. Will not be touched as if a signature makes me conquered. His eyes darkened, not with anger at her, but at the necessity of the statement. Never. The word was quiet enough to be believed. Beatrice looked at him for a long moment. Then show me the terms again before you show me the chapel. Lucian bowed his head once. As you wish, Lady Beatrice. Outside, the carriage turned from the broader street into a narrower lane, and the bells of a nearby church began to mark the quarter before midnight. St. Anselm's chapel stood in a narrow London street where the lamps burned lower, and the houses leaned close enough to make even a ducal carriage seem like a confession. When the wheels stopped, Beatrice did not move at once. The bells had finished marking the quarter before midnight, and the quiet that followed seemed to ask whether she understood what stood before her. A chapel door. A license prepared without her knowledge. A man across from her who had told enough truth to make refusal possible. Lady Maud pushed back her cloak and looked toward the small stone entrance with brisk disapproval. There it is. Less dramatic than ruin, which is in its favor. Lucian opened the carriage door himself, then stepped down and waited. He did not reach for Beatrice until she leaned forward. Even then he offered his hand palm upward, not as command, but as choice. She placed her gloved fingers on his and descended into the damp night, with the cracked pearl comb wrapped in her handkerchief and Seraphina's note folded against her palm. The chapel door opened before they reached it. A thin rector with silver hair and anxious kindness stood in the doorway, holding a candle that shook only a little. "Your Grace," he said to Lucian, then looked at Beatrice with immediate correction in his eyes, as if he knew already that rank was not the only dignity present. Lady Beatrice. Lady Maud stepped ahead of them. "Mr. Pike, you remember my instructions?" "I do, my lady." "Say them." Mr. Pike's face colored, but he obeyed. "Nothing proceeds unless Lady Beatrice gives explicit consent. She may refuse at any point. The license was lawfully prepared before this evening through prior application, and is valid only if both parties enter the marriage freely. No person present is to presume that distress is agreement." Beatrice looked at Lady Maud. The older woman lifted one shoulder. "Men trust documents. I prefer to discipline the men holding them." A breath left Beatrice before it could become laughter. Lucian's gaze moved to her face, then away, granting her privacy even from his concern. Inside, St. Anselm's was plain and narrow, with worn pews, a small altar, and candlelight pooling over the stone floor. There were no flowers, no music. No crowd eager to measure her worth by Adrian's preference. Her ivory ball gown looked almost strange in that humble place, too fine for the hour, and too bruised by memory to be bridal. Beatrice was glad of it. She did not want a costume of innocence. She wanted the truth of the night to stand beside her. Mr. Pike led them to a small table where the license and register waited. Beside it lay Lucian's written terms, copied in a clear hand. Beatrice took them before anyone spoke. She read every line again. Separate rooms, private correspondence, personal allowance. Independent solicitor. No claim upon her mother's effects. No public use of her name against Carrington without her approval. After 1 year, if she wished to live apart, an income and residence would be secured without contest. The words had not changed. Her circumstances had. That made them heavier. "I require 1 more term," she said. Lucian looked at her. "Name it. You will not call this rescue when speaking of it to anyone." Lady Maud's eyes sharpened with approval, Mr. Pike looked startled. Lucian did not. "Agreed, and you will not let others call it that in my hearing." "Agreed. If society must speak, it will say I chose." "It will say that," Lucian said, "or it will be corrected." The answer entered her chest with dangerous warmth. She set the paper down. "Then I will hear the vows." Mr. Pike did not begin. Instead, he looked directly at her. "My lady, do you wish to marry His Grace the Duke of Wycliffe this night?" Beatrice heard Carrington House behind the question. She heard Adrian's speech, her father's command, Seraphina's note. She heard every version of herself London would prefer by morning. Ruined girl, proud girl, convenient girl, forgotten girl. Then she heard her own voice, quiet and unborrowed. "Yes." Lucian's breath changed, only slightly. Mr. Pike turned to him. "Your Grace, do you wish to marry Lady Beatrice Vale this night?" "Yes," Lucian said. "And you understand, Mr. Pike continued, gaining courage from the seriousness of the room. That consent given under pressure of scandal must be protected, not presumed. Lucian looked at Beatrice when he answered. "I understand." Lady Maud settled herself in the front pew with the air of a duchess in battle. though she was neither duchess nor armed with anything but a cane and formidable contempt. Good. Proceed before somebody foolish comes hammering at the door. The ceremony began. The words were old, older than the scandal, older than Carrington's vanity, older than Lord Vale's debts. Beatrice expected them to feel like chains. Instead, because she had been asked and asked again, they felt like stones placed across a flood. Not soft, not romantic, useful. When Mr. Pike asked who gave her away, the silence that followed might have humiliated another woman. Beatrice lifted her chin. "No one gives me," she said. "I stand for myself, Mr." Pike looked uncertain for 1 second. Lady Maud leaned forward. "The lady has spoken clearly." Lucian did not smile, but something in his face altered as if the words had found a place in him and would remain there. He stepped closer only when instructed. The chapel seemed to hold its breath. His hand, when it took hers, was warm through the gloves, and careful enough to remind her that care could be stronger than possession. "I will," he said when the vow came to him, and he did not say it like triumph. He said it like duty freely chosen. Beatrice spoke her own vow without faltering. "I will." The ring was simple gold. Lucian held it above her finger, then paused. "May I?" The rector blinked. Lady Maud pretended to examine a candle. Beatrice looked at the man before her, the Duke whose name would change the morning, and understood that this small question mattered more than the ring. "Yes." He slid it onto her hand. It fit too well for something born of contingency. That frightened her, it steadied her. Both truths stood together, Mr. Pike pronounced them man and wife, with a voice that nearly broke on the final word. Outside, somewhere in London, midnight had begun to gather itself. Inside the chapel, Beatrice looked at her hand and saw Wycliffe gold where Carrington's ring had been. There was no music to applaud the exchange, no ballroom to devour it. Only candlelight, witnesses, and the ink waiting in the register. Lucian signed first with controlled precision. Beatrice took the pen after him. The nib hovered over the page. For one dangerous instant, she saw the girl who had stood in ivory under chandeliers, while another woman wore scarlet, and smiled. Then she wrote, Beatrice Harrow. The letters looked unfamiliar and steady. Mr. Pike sanded the page. Lady Maud rose and signed as witness with such force that the pen scratched. "There," she said. "Respectability has been satisfied, though I doubt it deserves the honor." Beatrice almost smiled. The expression came closer this time. Lucian saw it and looked away before she could feel observed. That restraint was beginning to undo her, more than boldness would have done. She unfolded the handkerchief and looked at the cracked pearl comb. One pearl sat crooked where it had struck the ballroom floor. "It was my mother's," she said, not knowing why she told him. Lucian stood beside her, leaving space between their shoulders. "I thought it might be. Because it broke? Because you reached for it as if it was the only thing in that room that had loved you." The words were too accurate. Beatrice closed the handkerchief around the comb. "You notice too much, Your Grace, so I have been told. It is not always a virtue." "No, he accepted that too, Mr." Pike had just closed the register when the sound of wheels struck the lane outside, fast enough to make Lady Maud turn her head. A carriage stopped beyond the chapel door. A man's voice demanded the rector. Beatrice knew that voice before the handle rattled. "Adrian." Mr. Pike went pale. Lucian moved, not toward Beatrice, but toward the door. He opened it before anyone outside could force drama upon the chapel. Adrian Winslow stood on the step without his hat, his fair hair disturbed by haste, his face white beneath the lamps. Behind him, a Carrington footman hovered in misery. Adrian's eyes went past Lucian and found Beatrice. Then they dropped to the ring on her hand. The change in him was almost worth the pain that had brought her there. "What have you done?" he asked. Lucian's voice was quiet. "You will not enter unless her grace permits it." Adrian flinched at the title. Beatrice felt the room turn toward her, but this time the attention did not demand a performance. It awaited her will. She stepped forward until candlelight reached the gold on her hand. "You chose before witnesses, Your Grace," she said. "So did I." "Beatrice, this is madness." "No," she said. Madness was expecting me to stand where you left me until morning made me smaller. His face tightened. You cannot mean this. I do. Seraphina's note lay folded in her palm. The cracked comb rested against her heart. Lucian stood by the door, like a line no one would cross without her leave. Beatrice looked at Adrian, and for the first time that night, she did not feel chosen against. What you taught me to do, she said, was choose before others chose for me. By breakfast, 3 versions of Beatrice's marriage had reached London, and none of them allowed her consent. In one, she had flung herself upon the Duke of Wycliffe in a fit of wounded pride. In another, Lucian had carried her to a chapel, while scandal made her too stunned to refuse. In the cruelest version, whispered with pity sharp enough to draw blood, she had been compromised into Wycliffe because no honourable woman could leave one duke's ballroom and enter another duke's carriage without losing the right to explain herself. Beatrice heard these versions from calling cards, from notes written in the language of concern, and from the careful silence of servants who knew gossip before their employers admitted it. Wycliffe House stood in Grosvenor Square, with a dignity unlike Carrington House. It did not glitter, it observed. Its walls were panelled in dark wood, its carpets deep enough to soften footsteps, and its servants moved with the quiet discipline of a household accustomed to a master who disliked unnecessary noise. Beatrice had slept less than 2 hours. In the east chamber, Lucian had assigned to her a room with a locked writing desk, a fire already lit, and no connecting door. That absence had mattered more than any comfort. At 10 o'clock, she entered the morning room, wearing a pale grey gown, borrowed from Lady Maud, her own ball dress having been taken away to be brushed of candle smoke and humiliation. Her new ring rested on her hand, plain gold, unadorned, and impossible to ignore. Lucian stood near the window with a stack of calling cards on the table beside him. Lady Maud sat by the fire, reading one of the notes through a quizzing glass and looking deeply offended on behalf of civilization. Lady Octavia Fenwick has sent her card, Lady Maud said. She expresses concern. I have always thought concern one of the more dishonest perfumes. Lucian looked at Beatrice. You are not obliged to receive anyone. Obligation has had a busy night, Beatrice said. I would prefer not to serve it breakfast. Lady Maud gave a dry approving sound. Lucian did not smile, but his eyes warmed slightly before he looked down at the cards. Then I will have them turned away. No. His gaze returned to her. No, if Lady Octavia is sent away, she will say I am hiding. If she is received, she may say I am brazen. I prefer the version in which I hear the poison before it is poured elsewhere. You need not face it alone. I know. The answer surprised both of them. Beatrice felt it in the pause that followed. She had not said it because marriage had made him safe. She had said it because he had asked before deciding. Receive her, Beatrice said, but only Lady Octavia. Not the whole flock. Lucian turned to the footman at the door. Lady Octavia may be admitted. No one else until Her Grace gives permission. Her Grace. The title still sat strangely upon Beatrice, but it no longer felt like a costume stolen in the night. It felt like a door with a lock on her side. Lady Octavia entered within minutes, dressed in lavender silk that pretended softness and failed. Her curtsy was exact. Her eyes were not. Your Grace, she said to Lucian, then turned to Beatrice with a pause thin enough to cut. Your Grace. How quickly London must learn new forms of address. London enjoys practice, Beatrice replied. It changes loyalties often enough. Lady Octavia's smile did not move her eyes. I came at once. After such an extraordinary evening, one hardly knows whether to offer congratulations or comfort. Then offer neither until you know what you mean. Lady Maud coughed into her hand. Not convincingly. Lady Octavia lowered herself into the offered chair. How fortunate that His Grace was present to provide assistance. Some have wondered whether such assistance, given at such an hour, might be misunderstood. Lucian remained by the window, silent. Beatrice noticed the restraint and understood its cost. Some people work very hard to misunderstand women, she said. It gives them something to do between scandals. My dear Duchess, no one wishes to wound you. That phrase has had a poor record since last night. Lady Octavia's fan opened. Black ribs, pale silk. A gentler weapon than the fan she had carried at Carrington House, but still a weapon. There is also the question of haste. A chapel before midnight. A license already waiting. Even generous minds may ask whether distress can truly give consent. Beatrice felt the strike and recognized its design. Lady Octavia was not merely insulting her. She was rehearsing the new story. Not discarded, not chosen. Swept away, compromised, silent again. Generous minds, Beatrice said, usually ask the woman before answering for her. And were you asked, repeatedly? By men? By a rector? By Lady Maud? By His Grace? And, most importantly, by myself. Lady Octavia's gaze flicked toward Lucian, perhaps hoping he would step in and make Beatrice look managed. He did not. How modern that sounds. No, Beatrice said, only inconvenient. A young maid entered with tea at that moment, her face pale with concentration. She could not have been more than 17, with brown hair tucked beneath her cap and hands determined not to shake. Lady Octavia shifted one slipper the smallest distance as the girl approached. The tray tilted. A cup slipped, struck the carpet, and spilled tea across the hem of Lady Octavia's gown. The maid went white. My lady, I'm so sorry. Lady Octavia drew back with a soft cry that carried more judgment than pain. Good heavens! Does Wycliffe House train servants in barns? The girl's eyes filled. Please, Your Grace, I didn't mean. Beatrice stood before anyone else could move. What is your name? Martha, Your Grace. Martha, no cup is worth terror. Bring a cloth, then return with fresh tea when your hands are steady. Martha stared at her. You aren't dismissing me. For spilling tea? No. I have seen greater disasters committed by people holding titles. Lady Maud made a sound dangerously close to laughter. Lucian turned his face toward the window, but not before Beatrice saw the change in him. It was not amusement. It was recognition, as though something he had suspected about her had become certainty. Lady Octavia dabbed at her gown with furious delicacy. Excessive indulgence breeds insolence. Beatrice looked down at her. Cruelty breeds fear and calls itself discipline. You presume to lecture me after one night as a duchess? No, I learned this before the title. The title merely gives you less permission to ignore it. Martha returned with a cloth, still trembling but breathing. Beatrice took the cloth from her, not to clean Lady Octavia's gown herself, but to remove the spectacle from the girl's hands. That will be all for now. Thank you. Martha curtsied and left with a look of stunned gratitude. Lady Octavia rose. I see Wycliffe House has changed more than its duchess. Lucian spoke at last. Not enough, perhaps. His voice was soft, and that made it more dangerous. But it has begun. Lady Octavia's fan closed. I came in concern. I leave enlightened. A busy call, Lady Maud said. Lady Octavia turned toward Beatrice. You may find, Duchess, that society is less easily corrected than servants. Beatrice held her gaze. Society has had longer practice being wrong. The silence after that sentence was brief, but satisfying. Lady Octavia curtsied, exact as a blade, and left the room with her dignity intact enough to carry malice elsewhere. Only when the door closed did Lady Maud set aside her quizzing glass. Well, I disliked her before, but now I have structure for it. Beatrice looked at the tea stain on the carpet. She will repeat everything. Yes, Lucian said. But she will repeat that you received her, answered her, and did not hide. She will say I am proud. You are. Beatrice looked up. Is that criticism? No. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her more than praise would have done. A footman entered before she could reply, carrying a small folded note on a salver. For her grace, it was left at the servant's entrance. Lucian's expression changed. By whom, a boy, your grace? He ran before anyone could question him. Beatrice took the note herself. There was no seal, no scent of violets this time, only a hard fold and a hand that had tried to appear careless. She opened it while Lucian watched her face instead of the paper. Ask why your father prepared your second wedding before your first was broken. The room seemed to draw inward. Lady Maud no longer looked amused. Lucian's jaw tightened once, then stilled. Beatrice, he said quietly, You knew enough to fear my father would force my hand, she said. Did you know why? Not fully. That is not no. No. The honesty struck harder than denial. Beatrice folded the note with careful fingers and placed it beside Seraphina's violet message on the table. 2 notes, 2 hands, one trap widening into another. Then we begin there, she said. Lucian stepped closer, but stopped before entering the space around her. I will make inquiries. Beatrice looked at him, at the man who had protected her door but still carried truths he had measured before giving. No, she said. We will make inquiries. For the first time that morning, his mouth softened into something almost like a smile. As you wish, Your Grace. The second note lay between them, like a door that had opened inward instead of out. Beatrice stood beside the table in Wycliffe House, with Lady Octavia's perfume still fading from the room. Seraphina's violet threat folded beside the newer message, and Lucian, watching her, with the expression of a man who had expected a blow, but not its precise direction. Ask why your father prepared your second wedding before your first was broken. The words had not wounded her as Adrian's speech had. They had done something colder. They had made the chapel feel less like escape, and more like a room whose walls she had not been allowed to inspect. Lady Maud rose from her chair with unusual quiet. I shall be in the next room, she said. Not because I am delicate, but because married people should occasionally discover whether honesty can survive without an aunt holding a cane over it. She left before either could answer. The door remained partly open. Propriety stayed. So did privacy enough to hurt. Beatrice looked at Lucian. How much did you know before I said yes? He did not reach for the notes. He did not move toward her. Instead, he crossed to the writing desk, took a leather folder from the drawer, and set it on the table without opening it. Then he stepped back. The gesture was small. It mattered. He had placed truth within her reach and removed himself from the space around it. Enough to fear your father was making arrangements faster than he admitted, he said. Not enough to know who had encouraged him. That is the answer a careful man gives when he has rehearsed being accused. Yes, the admission struck her more sharply than denial would have done. Do you rehearse often? When I know I have been wrong. Beatrice opened the folder. Inside lay a copy of a promissory note, several lines of correspondence, and one short memorandum written in a solicitor's hand. She did not pretend to understand all of it. She understood enough. Adrian's name appeared where honor should have been. Lord Vale's name did not appear directly, but a guarantor connected to him did. Money had moved beneath her engagement like water beneath rotting boards. This was the pressure behind Carrington, she said. Part of it. Do not soften it. Lucian's gaze held. Your marriage to Carrington would have settled or concealed obligations tied to Lord Vale's exposure. If Carrington failed, your father needed another ducal alliance quickly enough to keep creditors, gossip, and inquiry from closing around him. She looked down at the papers. The room remained warm, but the cold from Carrington House had returned in another form. So, last night, when I thought I had been publicly discarded, I had actually become inconvenient to a financial arrangement. Yes, and when you offered marriage, you knew I was standing in the middle of that arrangement. Yes. Beatrice closed the folder. The sound was soft. Final. You told me enough to make consent possible, not enough to make trust possible. Lucian absorbed that as if he had earned it. That is true. Were you afraid I would refuse if I knew everything? No. Then why not tell me? His face changed, the smallest break in discipline. Because the clock was against you. Because your father was in the corridor. Because Carrington had already made you the center of a room's cruelty. Because I thought too much truth, given at once, might feel like another hand closing around your throat. And you decided how much I could bear. He lowered his eyes for the first time. Yes. Silence followed. It did not soften anything. It gave the truth room to stand. Beatrice looked at the ring on her hand, then at the notes on the table. That is what frightens me, Lucian. His name emerged before she considered it. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He did not use it against her. That I decided? He asked. that you may be better than the others, and still accustomed to deciding. The words cost her, but not as much as silence would have. Lucian took one measured breath. I cannot undo last night. No, I can tell you that I am sorry. I have heard men be sorry for consequences. Then I will be sorry for the act. He looked at her fully. I should have trusted you sooner with the full truth. Not because it would have changed your choice, but because the choice was yours before I knew how to protect it. Her throat tightened. She turned away before he saw too much. On the mantel, the morning fire settled with a low sound. Beyond the open door, Lady Maud's cane tapped once, then fell silent again. Beatrice almost laughed at the restraint of being chaperoned by impatience. Instead, she reached for the handkerchief that held the cracked pearl comb. There is another truth, she said. One that does not belong to solicitors. She unwrapped the comb and placed it on the table. In daylight, the damage looked more intimate. The central pearl had split wider at the edge. One gold prong sat bent. Lucian stepped closer, then stopped, waiting. May I examine it? He asked. Yes. He lifted the comb with the care he had shown in the ballroom. This time Beatrice watched not only his hands, but the concentration in his face. He did not look at jewels as a man admiring value. He looked at damage as if it might speak. This prong did not bend from the fall alone, he said. How can you tell? The metal was already loosened. The fall completed what someone began. Beatrice felt her hand close around the edge of the table. Someone touched it. Lightly. Lucian turned the comb toward the light. His brows drew together. There. He took a letter knife from the desk and used the blunt edge to lift something from beneath the pearl setting. A thread, fine and bright, clung to the gold. Scarlet. Beatrice did not need to ask whose gown had been that color. Serafina had stood close enough behind her in the ballroom before Adrian entered. Close enough to murmur condolence if she had wished. Close enough to loosen a comb and make a bride appear disordered, just as scandal began. She wanted it to fall, Beatrice said. Her voice sounded calm from a distance. Not merely to embarrass you, Lucian said. To make the room see you coming undone while she appeared composed. The cruelty was so precise that it became almost elegant. That made Beatrice hate it more. Serafina had not relied upon Adrian's choice alone. She had dressed the scene. Scarlet silk, trembling mouth, Carrington fan, loosened comb, violet note. Every object had been placed to make Beatrice disappear beneath interpretation. She did not only steal his attention, Beatrice said. She staged my collapse. Lucian laid the thread on a small sheet of paper. And your father may have known enough of the timing to profit from it, or to panic when it did not end as planned. She touched the broken comb. The crack no longer looked like shame. It looked like a witness injured for telling the truth. We will keep the thread. Yes, and the notes. Yes, and the folder. It is yours to read whenever you wish. Beatrice looked at him. You will not decide what I am ready to know. No. Do you promise because I ask, or because you believe it? Both. But belief came later than it should have. That answer did not heal the wound. It kept it from deepening. A footman appeared at the open door, holding a silver salver. His eyes flicked once toward the table, then lowered with disciplined speed. A message from Carrington House, Your Grace. Lucian did not reach for it. Beatrice noticed. The footman, after a moment's uncertainty, offered it to her. She took it. The seal bore Carrington arms. The handwriting on the direction was not Adrian's. It was smoother, more decorative, and faintly familiar in its confidence. Beatrice broke the seal. His Grace, the Duke of Carrington and the Dowager. Duchess of Carrington requested the honor of the Duke and Duchess of Wycliffe's company at dinner that evening, so that recent misunderstandings might be addressed with civility among those most concerned. Misunderstandings, Beatrice said. How efficient. They have already begun shrinking the word betrayal. Lucian read the note after she handed it to him. This is not Carrington's phrasing, Serafina, or Lady Octavia. The Dowager Duchess may not know what has been written in her name. Possibly not. Beatrice looked at the scarlet thread, then at the violet note, then at the anonymous message that had dragged her father's shadow across the marriage. They want us back in the house where the first version was made. Yes, to restore peace, to restore control. The distinction settled between them. Lucian's face was composed, but his eyes had darkened. You do not have to go, Beatrice almost smiled. You keep saying that as though the words are a gift. They are meant as one, they are. But tonight I choose to go. Why? Because Lady Octavia came here to test whether I could be made to defend my own consent. Seraphina sent one note to erase me, and perhaps another hand sent one to expose my father. Carrington House is not inviting us to dinner. It is inviting us to step back into the story they prefer. She folded the invitation with deliberate care. I would like to hear the second lie before they polish it. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. In his restraint there was concern, admiration, and something more dangerous because it asked for nothing. Then we go together. Together, she said. Not with you before me, no. Not with me hidden behind your title. Never. Beatrice gathered the comb, the scarlet thread, and the 2 notes. The objects looked small on the table. Too small for the ruin they had been meant to create. Then have the carriage made ready for Carrington House, she said. Tonight I am returning with evidence. Lucian bowed his head once. As you wish, Beatrice. This time, she did not correct him. Carrington House looked different when Beatrice returned as the Duchess of Wycliffe, though not one stone had moved. The same lamps burned above the entrance. The same footman stood at attention. The same windows threw gold across the wet street, as if light could polish away what had happened beneath it. Yet the house no longer seemed grand to her, it seemed practiced. It knew how to receive guests, conceal panic, and train cruelty to speak in a gentle voice. Lucian stepped down first and turned toward her. He did not offer his hand until she leaned forward. That small waiting had become a language between them. Beatrice placed her gloved fingers in his and descended with the cracked pearl comb wrapped in her reticule, the scarlet thread folded in paper beside it, and 2 notes resting against her palm like quiet witnesses. Remember, he said low. Enough that only she heard. You may leave at any time, I know, and if they begin before dinner, then we shall be spared the soup. His eyes warmed, but his face remained composed. The door opened. Inside, Carrington House received them with the strained elegance of a household, pretending the floor had not cracked. A servant announced them as the Duke and Duchess of Wycliffe, and the title travelled ahead like a bell struck in a room that preferred whispers. In the drawing room, Adrian stood near the mantel, in black evening dress, handsome, pale, and visibly unprepared for the sight of Beatrice, calm beneath another duke's name. The Dowager Duchess of Carrington sat upright on a sofa, grief and embarrassment held together by breeding. Lord Vale stood by the windows, his face smooth with anger he had spent the day teaching to behave. Lady Octavia Fenwick occupied a chair as if it were a throne. Seraphina Rowe stood beside Adrian in a gown of pale blue, the colour of innocence carefully selected after scarlet had done its work. Beatrice saw the change and understood it at once. Tonight Seraphina would not be fire, she would be mist. Your Grace, Adrian said to Lucian, then hesitated before bowing to Beatrice. Your Grace, the second title cost him. She accepted it with a slight inclination of her head. Carrington. Seraphina lowered her lashes. I hoped you would come. It would be dreadful if misunderstanding hardened into bitterness. Misunderstandings are usually accidental, Beatrice said. I have found intention much harder to soften. Lady Octavia's fan opened. Surely we are not to begin with accusation. Lucian looked at her. I thought that was why we were invited. The Dowager Duchess closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with visible effort. Dinner is ready, she said. Perhaps a table will discipline us. No table could have done so, but everyone obeyed, because aristocracy often mistook movement for control. In the dining room, Beatrice was placed beside Lucian, and across from Seraphina, a courtesy so deliberate it became a challenge. Adrian sat at the head. The Dowager Duchess watched him as if fear had aged her overnight. Lord Vale avoided Beatrice's gaze. That was new. Her father had never feared, looking at her before. because he had never imagined she might look back with knowledge. The first course arrived, and with it came conversation so brittle that every polite sentence seemed likely to break. Adrian spoke of rain. Lady Octavia spoke of crowded drawing rooms. Lord Vale praised the discipline of silence in difficult times. Beatrice looked at him over the rim of her glass. Silence is often most admired by those who benefit from it. Lord Vale's fork paused. I spoke generally. So did I. Lucian did not look at her, but she felt his stillness beside her turn almost protective. Serafina placed one hand lightly over the tablecloth near her plate, close enough for everyone to notice its tremor. I know there is pain in this room, she said. I would never deny that. But there are pains no young woman can speak of without risking more than her reputation. Adrian's face tightened with immediate concern. Beatrice saw the wrong choice form before he made it. Again. Not in a ballroom this time, but across candles, china, and witnesses who had been invited to call manipulation civility. Serafina, he murmured. You needn't say more. Perhaps she should, Lucian said. His voice was quiet, but every servant near the wall seemed to still. An implication that cannot bear a direct sentence is not innocence. It is strategy. Serafina's eyes lifted to him, bright with injured surprise. Your Grace, I don't know what you mean. Then speak plainly, Beatrice said. You implied last night, and again now, that your claim upon Carrington involved some delicate condition. Do you say it directly? Adrian set down his glass. That is ungenerous. No, Beatrice said. It is exact. The Dowager Duchess whispered. Adrian let her answer. He looked at his mother, startled that she had not protected his preferred version of the room. Serafina's hand moved faintly toward her midsection, not touching, only suggesting. I have been frightened. Of a fact, Lucian asked, or of losing the advantage of being unexamined? Lady Octavia leaned forward. This is monstrous. Miss Rowe is not on trial. Neither was I last night, Beatrice said. Yet I was sentenced before the orchestra stopped echoing. Silence landed hard. Serafina's color rose, but she recovered with admirable speed. I never wished you harm. You sent me a note. I did no such thing. Before midnight, no one will remember you were ever his bride. Beatrice did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The sentence moved through the room and changed its temperature. Adrian looked at Serafina. What note? Anyone may write a cruel line, Lady Octavia said. To attach it to Miss Rose because she wore scarlet is beneath you. Beatrice turned her gaze to Lady Octavia. Strange that you mention scarlet before I do. Lady Octavia's fan stopped. A small thing, a telling one. Lucian's attention sharpened. Serafina gave a soft laugh that almost managed to tremble. This is why we asked you here. Pain has made you see designs everywhere. No, Beatrice said. Pain made me late to see them. Lord Vale set down his wine. Enough. This dinner was intended to restore peace, not encourage theatrical grievances. Peace, Beatrice said, looking at him, or control. His eyes narrowed. You forget yourself. I remembered myself last night. That is what has distressed everyone. Adrian pushed back from the table slightly. Beatrice, you are wounded. I accept responsibility for that, but do not turn your injury into revenge upon Serafina. The room seemed to wait for her to bend under the old name. Lucian's hand rested near his glass, unmoving. He did not correct Adrian. Not yet. Beatrice did. It is your grace in this house as well as yours. Adrian flushed. Your grace, thank you. The correction was small. Its effect was not. Serafina's eyes flashed, then softened instantly. This is unbearable. I came willing to be humbled, willing to endure blame for love, but I will not be torn apart by a woman who married another man. Before the night had even cooled. If I was so unwanted, Beatrice said, why are you all so offended that I left? The question struck the table like dropped silver. No one answered. Even Lord Vale looked away. That was when Serafina reached for her handkerchief. Perhaps she meant to dab her eyes. Perhaps she meant to create another image of tenderness. Either way, a folded paper slipped from her reticule and fell beside her chair. Its wax seal flashed red against the carpet. Beatrice saw the mark before Serafina's foot moved to hide it. Vale. Lord Vale inhaled sharply. Too sharply. Lucian rose with unhurried precision. "Miss Rowe," he said, "you have dropped something." Serafina went very still. "It is nothing." "Then you will not object to setting it on the table." Lady Octavia's voice cut in. "This is intolerable." "It is only paper," Beatrice said. "Why does paper frighten everyone who invited us here for civility?" Adrian looked down at the seal. For the first time that evening, doubt crossed his face in a way Serafina could not immediately charm away. "Serafina," he said, "give it to me." "No." The word was too quick, too naked. She recovered, but not fully. "It is private." Beatrice looked at her father. "Private correspondence with my family." Lord Vale's expression hardened. "Do not be absurd, then deny it." His silence answered before he did. "You are allowing a fallen comb, an anonymous note, and a dropped paper to unmake reason." Beatrice opened her reticule and touched the packet, holding the scarlet thread. She did not reveal it yet. Not in that room. Not before she knew who would reach for which lie. "Reason," she said, "does not usually panic when evidence enters." Adrian stood. "I will not allow Serafina to be badgered." There it was. The second wrong choice, smaller than the ballroom and therefore more revealing. He had seen the seal. He had heard the refusal. He had watched his mother pale, Lord Vale evade, Lady Octavia interfere, and still he turned toward the woman who knew how to tremble for him. Beatrice felt the last brittle remnant of expectation break cleanly away. Lucian stepped back from the table. "Then this dinner is over for the Duke and Duchess of Wycliffe." The title filled the room with finality. The Dowager Duchess rose, distressed. "Wycliffe, please." There must be some way to prevent this from becoming worse. Lucian looked at her with respect, but no softness for the lie she wished to preserve. "Your Grace, it is already worse. It has merely become less hidden." He turned to Beatrice. "Shall we?" She stood. No one stopped her. That was new as well. Serafina clutched the folded paper to her side. Lady Octavia's fan trembled once, not with weakness, but anger. Lord Vale looked at Beatrice as though she had become a debt he could no longer postpone. In the carriage, the silence lasted until Carrington House had disappeared behind them, for the second time in 2 days. Beatrice drew the scarlet thread from her reticule and laid it beside Serafina's violet note on her lap. "My father helped her," she said. Lucian sat opposite, his face shadowed by passing lamps. "Yes." She closed her hand over the thread. "Then I do not want protection from the truth anymore." "No," he said quietly. "You shall have the truth." The carriage turned into the London night, and this time Beatrice did not feel pursued by scandal. She felt it running behind her, trying to catch up. The order left Beatrice before the carriage had reached Grosvenor Square. "Take me to Vale House." Lucian looked up from the dark window. The passing lamps cut his face into brief planes of light and shadow, but his voice remained steady. "Tonight?" "My father left Carrington House with Serafina's sealed paper, still in that room or hidden in his hand. By morning, he will have burned what can be burned and explained what cannot. He will provoke you. He has done that for years. This time, he may wound with more precision." Beatrice looked down at the scarlet thread lying beside the violet note in her lap. The thread was so small that it seemed impossible for it to carry such malice. Yet it had survived the ballroom, the chapel, the morning callers, and the dinner where innocence wore blue. "Then I would rather know where he aims." Lucian tapped the carriage roof and gave the order. When he settled back, he did not tell her she was brave or unwise. He only watched her as if anger, when disciplined, deserved the same respect as grief. "When we arrive," Beatrice said, "you will not speak for me unless I ask." "I won't, even if he calls me foolish. I will endure foolishness, even if he calls me ruined." His eyes hardened. No. The answer should have displeased her. Instead, it steadied her because it was honest. A man who promised perfect restraint before insult had either never heard true cruelty or intended to lie. "Then we understand one another." "I hope so." That quiet hope followed them through the wet streets to Vale House, where one lamp burned at the entrance, and the brass knocker shone with the desperate polish of a household hiding decay. The butler opened the door, saw Beatrice, and began the old address by habit. Lady Bea. His gaze fell to the ring on her hand. Your Grace. The correction passed through the hall like a servant carrying fire. Beatrice stepped inside without waiting for permission. She had waited in that hall through childhood, while her father finished letters, received creditors as acquaintances, and made decisions that shaped her life from rooms where she had not been invited. Tonight she did not sit. Tell Lord Vale the Duchess of Wycliffe requests 10 minutes. The butler looked toward Lucian, then back to her, as if the presence of one duke explained the courage of a woman. At once, Your Grace. Lucian remained half a step behind her. The distance was exact, near enough to protect, far enough not to possess. Lord Vale opened the drawing-room door himself. He had changed nothing but his expression. His coat was immaculate, his cravat severe, his face composed in the polished outrage of a man who intended to be the injured party. This is improper. Beatrice walked past him into the room. Then it will be familiar to everyone involved. His gaze moved to Lucian. Your Grace, I will not have my house invaded near midnight. Lucian's tone was mild. Then it is fortunate we came before dawn gave scandal time to multiply. Lord Vale shut the door. You have always had an appetite for superiority, Wycliffe. Tonight I have an appetite for accuracy. Beatrice turned to her father. Speak to me. Lord Vale's nostrils flared. You are overwrought. It's your Grace now, father. His mouth tightened. Do not play at grandeur with me. Don't mistake correction for grandeur. I learned forms of address from men who value them more than kindness. For a moment, he looked as if he might answer with the old command that had once made her lower her eyes. Instead, his gaze dropped to her hand, to Wycliffe's ring. You have made yourself useful to another man's resentment. Is that what you call consent when it does not profit you? I call it folly. Carrington behaved badly, but bad conduct can be repaired. A woman with sense does not run from an alliance because a man loses discipline over a pretty face. He did not lose discipline. He chose an audience. And you chose a chapel. After you chose it for me, 2 weeks before I knew I might need one. The room stilled. A log settled in the fire with a low crack, but neither man moved. Lord Vale's face did not change enough to satisfy a lesser observer. Beatrice had learned him too well. The smallest delay in his answer was confession. A prudent father prepares for uncertainty. You knew Carrington might abandon me. I knew he was young, indulged, and susceptible to theatrical women, and still you meant me to marry him. Marriage is not a poem, Beatrice. No, in your hands it became an account book. His eyes flashed. You understand nothing of accounts. I understand I was entered into yours. Lord Vale turned away, then faced her with a smoother tone. The change was more dangerous than anger. Our family stood under pressure. Carrington offered connection, stability, and settlement. If that failed, another respectable arrangement had to be considered before gossip closed every door. Wycliffe. His Grace was suitable. Lucian said nothing. His silence gave the word suitable all the ugliness it deserved. And if Wycliffe refused, Beatrice asked. Lord Vale's jaw set. There were alternatives. Name one. The Marquess of Fenton had expressed a willingness to consider the matter. Beatrice had heard the name. Fenton was a widower with sons older than she was, an estate worn thin by gambling nephews, and a reputation for preferring women too isolated to object. Her stomach turned, but her voice did not. How generous of him to consider my ruin convenient. Fenton could provide stability where sentiment provides none. Stability is not love. Love is a dangerous word when creditors are waiting. There, not shouted, not confessed, spoken as if all decent families understood that affection must kneel when debt entered the room. Beatrice looked toward the small oval miniature of her mother on the mantel. Amelia Vale's painted face seemed young, patient, and unreachable. In the portrait she wore the pearls from which the comb had been made, the pearls Beatrice had been allowed to remember, but never truly own. My mother left me something, Beatrice said. Lord Vale's eyes narrowed. Your mother left memories. She left pearls, family jewels, her jewels, Everything in this house is governed by family need, even a dead woman's promise to her daughter. His silence had a different quality now, less contempt, more alarm. Beatrice opened her reticule and drew out the cracked pearl comb. The scarlet thread remained hidden. Not yet. She placed the comb on the table between them. This should have been mine without argument. Lord Vale's gaze fixed on the central pearl. That comb should not have left Vale House. Why? Because you are careless with things of value. No. Because it proves there were things of value I was not meant to question. He moved one hand, then stopped himself. Lucian noticed. Beatrice noticed Lucian noticing. Lord Vale recovered. You turn sentiment into accusation. Because Wycliffe has filled your head with suspicion. His Grace has filled my hand with documents. There is a difference. Documents can be made to flatter any grievance. Lucian spoke then, so quietly that the room had to lean toward him. Not if they are old enough to have been hidden before the grievance began. Lord Vale looked at him with open dislike. This is a family matter, Beatrice answered first. No. It is a property matter, a consent matter, and a truth matter. You made it all three. You would drag your mother's name through public mud to punish me. The question came wrapped in sorrow. Once it might have worked. Tonight, Beatrice heard the hinge of manipulation inside it. Don't put my mother between us because you have run out of walls. His face hardened. You speak boldly in another man's house, with another man's name. I speak boldly because last night I discovered how cheaply my silence had been priced. The words landed. Lord Vale stepped toward her, then stopped when Lucian moved only 1 inch. It was not threat, it was boundary. You will not treat my wife as an unruly asset, Lucian said. Not in this room. Not in any room where I have breath enough to object. Beatrice looked at him then. My wife. From another man, the phrase might have felt like a new chain. From Lucian, spoken only after Lord Vale tried to reduce her, it felt like a shield she had not asked him to lower, and he had not used to cover her voice. She turned back to her father. I will send my own solicitor in the morning. Lord Vale laughed once. Your own solicitor. You acquired a title last night, and now imagine yourself equipped for business. My mother may have imagined it before you did. The drawing-room door opened after a sharp knock. The butler appeared, pale with the awareness that no proper household should interrupt such absence unless worse waited outside. Your Grace, he said to Lucian, Mr. Alton has arrived from your solicitor's office. He says he was instructed to come at once if he found anything among the old Vale papers. Lord Vale's face changed before he could command it back. He has no authority to search my papers. Lucian's gaze did not leave him. Then you will be relieved if he found nothing. The butler swallowed. He says there is a codicil, Your Grace. Beatrice's fingers closed around the edge of the table. To my mother's will? Yes, Your Grace. The butler looked at her now, not Lucian. Mr. Alton says the codicil mentions the pearls, the comb, and a portion settled for Lady Beatrice upon marriage. Lord Vale stood utterly still. Outside the room, papers rustled in the hall, small and dry as old leaves waking. Beatrice looked at the cracked comb on the table, no longer merely broken, no longer merely beloved. It had become the first object in her life that refused to stay silent. Mr. Alton entered Vale House, with a leather case held close to his chest, and the cautious expression of a man who understood that old paper could be more dangerous than fresh scandal. He was not old, but he possessed the grave neatness of a clerk, trained to step into rooms where families lied elegantly and ask where the ink had been kept. Lord Vale tried to refuse him entry. Lucian said nothing. He merely looked toward the butler, and the butler, having served rank long enough to know which silence carried the heavier consequence, admitted Mr. Alton into the drawing-room. The codicil was read at the small table beneath Lady Amelia Vale's portrait, with the cracked pearl comb resting beside the candle as if it had summoned the words itself. Beatrice stood rather than sat. Her father stood opposite her. Lucian remained near the window, close enough to object if insult became cruelty, far enough to leave the truth facing her directly. Mr. Alton unfolded the paper and began. The late Countess of Vale had left to her daughter, Lady Beatrice Vale, all personal pearls inherited through her mother's line, including the comb made from the broken strand worn at her wedding, together with a modest, independent portion to be transferred upon Beatrice's marriage, or upon her reaching the age at which she might appoint a solicitor of her own. Choosing, each clause fell quietly, each one struck. Beatrice had expected anger to rise first. Instead, grief came, plain and sharp. Her mother had not left her only memory. She had left a key. Lord Vale had kept it hidden and then called the locked door duty. "This is irregular," Lord Vale said when Mr. Alton finished. "My wife was ill when many such papers were drafted." Sentiment can be made to look very formal in ink. Beatrice looked at the portrait. She was dying, so you hoped her love could be dismissed as weakness. Don't be melodramatic. Don't call theft management, because the thief wore a title, Mr. Alton lowered his eyes to the document. Lord Vale's face darkened. "You accuse your father in his own house?" "No. I identify him." Lucian moved once, a slight shift of weight, when Lord Vale stepped closer. Beatrice raised one hand without turning. He stopped. The restraint steadied her more than if he had spoken. "The portion," she said to Mr. Alton. "Was it transferred?" Mr. Alton's mouth tightened. "There is no record in the preliminary papers that it was properly transferred to Her Grace upon marriage. I would need bank confirmation, but the codicil gives clear ground to request an accounting." Lord Vale laughed once. "An accounting? From a daughter who never asked what candles cost. I did not know I was expected to pay for them with myself." "You were sheltered. I was stored." The word stunned the room because it was exact. Lord Vale's anger thinned into something colder. "You will regret making this public. Family matters handled by outsiders become filth for gossip. Family matters hidden by fathers become cages for daughters. You think Wycliffe's name will make you invulnerable?" Beatrice looked at him without lowering her eyes. "No, I think truth will make me less useful to liars, Mr. Alton carefully refolded the codicil. "Your Grace, I can have a formal copy made by morning and begin inquiries through the proper channels." He addressed Beatrice, not Lucian. That too was a restoration. "Do it," she said. Lord Vale snapped. "You will do nothing without my solicitor. My mother provided for my own." Lord Vale turned toward Lucian. "You are enjoying this?" Lucian's voice was quiet. "No, I do not enjoy watching a woman discover how long she was deprived." Beatrice felt the words without looking at him. They did not soften the room. They made it bearable. She took the cracked comb from the table and wrapped it again. "I will not return to Vale House as a daughter to be corrected. You cannot cut your family from your life. I am not cutting family from my life. I am cutting control from my name." She turned to leave. At the door, her father spoke once more, lower than before. "When scandal tires of you, do not expect blood to shelter what pride has ruined." Beatrice paused. The old wound recognized the old weapon. Then she looked back. "Blood should have sheltered me before scandal arrived." She walked out before he could answer, and this time, when Lucian offered his hand at the carriage, she took it by choice rather than balance. Dawn had begun to pale the edges of London when they returned to Wycliffe House. Lady Maud met them in the morning room, wearing a cap that suggested she had either slept poorly or refused to admit sleep had been necessary. By noon, the house had become a respectable chamber of strategy. All letters, tea, and restrained alarm. Mr. Alton sent confirmation that a copy of the codicil could be secured. A bank record might prove the portion had been held back. Lucian's solicitor requested permission to proceed. Beatrice wrote that permission herself in her new name, with Wycliffe wax sealing the fold. No one dictated, no one guided her hand. Lucian stood by the mantel while she wrote, silent enough to let the act belong to her. When the letter was done, he spoke. "There is a private path." Beatrice sanded the page. "Explain it. Your solicitor can demand accounting. Lord Vale can restore the portion and jewels quietly. Miss Rowe's note and the thread can remain private unless she attacks again. Carrington can be left to manage his own disgrace. You would still be vindicated where it matters legally. and socially, less cleanly, meaning they keep their peace. He did not pretend to misunderstand. Yes, she touched the seal until the wax cooled. I have been told all my life that peace is what women preserve by swallowing truth. I am not asking you to swallow it, no. You are asking whether I wish to avoid the room where it must be spoken. His expression changed, not with irritation, but with respect for the cut. I am asking whether you understand what that room will cost. Tell me. Lord Vale will try to call you ungrateful. Carrington will try to turn his shame into tragedy. Miss Rowe will use fragility as armor. Lady Octavia will make cruelty sound like social duty. People who secretly believe you will still pretend to require proof, because proof protects them from courage. And if I choose silence, they will call it dignity. Then I choose witnesses. The words settled inside her like a bell. Lady Maud, who had been pretending to read correspondence, looked over the top of the page. Good. Dignity is useful, but it has been overworked in women who were never allowed to say no. Lucian looked at Beatrice. Public accountability then, not spectacle. No, not revenge, no. Truth repeated accurately where lies were first rewarded. Yes. Before he could say more, Martha entered with a salver. Her hands were steadier than they had been the day before, though her eyes widened at the number of papers on the table. A letter for her Grace, from Carrington House. Beatrice took it. Adrian's hand was unmistakable, elegant and controlled where the man himself had not been. Her Grace, the Duchess of Wycliffe. The title looked strained beneath his pen, as if each letter had resisted him. She broke the seal. The letter was brief and uneven. Adrian wrote that he had been misled by Seraphina's implication, that he now feared matters had been arranged around him, as well as around Beatrice, that he had acted rashly, shamefully, and under a pressure he did not understand until too late. He begged a private meeting so that he might apologize and explain what had been done to them both. Beatrice read the final words twice, to them both. Even in remorse, Adrian had placed himself beside her in the wound he had made. She handed the letter to Lucian. He read it without expression, but the paper tightened slightly in his hand. He asks for privacy, he said. Of course he does, Lady Maud snorted. Men who wound in public become connoisseurs of privacy when apology is due. Beatrice looked at Lucian. What do you think? I think he will try to make himself pitiable. That was not my question. He looked up. The jealousy, if it was jealousy, did not show as heat. It showed as control drawn too fine. I think you have the right to decide whether to receive him. And what do you want? The question surprised him. For a moment, the Duke of Wycliffe looked like a man asked to step out from behind his own discipline. I want him nowhere near you unless every door is open and every lie has a witness. That is not the same as forbidding it. No. Why not? His answer came after one measured breath. Because I would rather suffer the discomfort of your choice than enjoy the ease of your obedience. Beatrice felt the room grow very still around that sentence. It was not romantic in the way songs were romantic. It was better. It was a vow disguised as restraint. She took the letter back. Then he may come at 4 o'clock. Here. Lady Maud present. Doors open. Agreed. She sat at the desk and wrote the reply in 3 sentences. Carrington might call at Wycliffe House at 4. He would be received in the drawing room. Anything he wished to say must be said where truth had witnesses. She sealed it with Wycliffe wax and gave it to Martha, who carried it away with the solemnity of a girl trusted to hold more than a letter. Lucian remained beside the mantel, watching Beatrice not as a rescuer awaiting gratitude, but as a man witnessing a woman choose the shape of her own battle. You understand this continues the scandal, he said. Beatrice laid her hand over the cracked comb wrapped beside the codicil. No, Your Grace, it continues the truth. The scandal began when everyone else tried to name it for me. At 4 in the afternoon, Adrian Winslow came to Wycliffe House, with the look of a man who had spent the journey, arranging remorse into phrases and discovered upon entering that remorse did not obey him any better than honor had. The drawing-room doors stood open. Lady Maud sat near the tea-table with her cane across her knees, no longer pretending to read. Lucian remained by the mantel, still enough to seem carved from the darker part of the room. Beatrice sat beside the writing desk with the cracked pearl comb, the violet note, the anonymous warning, the scarlet thread, and the copied codicil, arranged in a locked drawer rather than displayed. She had not invited Adrian to look at evidence. Not yet. She had invited him to reveal whether he could look at himself. When the footman announced His Grace, the Duke of Carrington, Adrian crossed the threshold and stopped. His eyes found Beatrice first. Then they moved to the room around her, to the chair placed for her comfort, to Martha setting down tea without fear, to Lucian standing, not before Beatrice, but beside the authority of her choice. Adrian saw perhaps for the first time that she had not merely taken another name. She had been received by it. "Your Grace," he said to Lucian. Then, after a pause that cost him more visibly, "Your Grace," he said to Beatrice. "Carrington," she answered. He flinched at the distance of it. Lady Maud lifted one brow. "You requested an apology with witnesses. Begin before courage cools." Adrian looked at the older woman, then back at Beatrice. "I deserve that." "You deserve more," Lady Maud said. "But we are all practicing restraint." Beatrice did not smile. "You wrote that Seraphina misled you." Adrian drew a breath. "Yes." "She did. Then say how." He looked down at his gloves, then removed them slowly, as if bare hands might make him more sincere. "She made me believe matters were urgent. She implied that if I did not acknowledge her publicly, I would abandon her to consequences no gentleman could ignore. She spoke of delicacy, fear, uncertainty, never plainly. I see that now. You see it because it has damaged you," Beatrice said. "Did you see it when it damaged me?" His face colored. "No, that is at least honest. I was vain," he said. "I wanted to believe my feelings were noble because they were strong. I told myself I was sparing you a cold marriage, but I chose the one method that made your pain useful to my courage." The words were better than she expected. Not enough. Better. "And Seraphina? She played upon my jealousy of Wycliffe's reputation." Adrian glanced toward Lucian, then away quickly. "She said men like him were waiting to use any failure of mine. She said if I delayed, I would lose both her and my freedom. I was a fool." "Yes," Beatrice said. The single word landed without cruelty because it needed none. Adrian swallowed. "I have come to say I am sorry." "For what?" "For humiliating you. That is the visible part." He closed his eyes briefly. "For letting a room judge you before I had the courage to judge myself." Closer. His expression tightened, not in anger but effort. "For choosing to protect her performance instead of your dignity." Beatrice looked at him steadily. "Had she not deceived you, would you have humiliated me less?" The room went utterly still. Lady Maud stopped turning her teacup. Lucian's gaze lowered, then lifted to Adrian with the quiet mercilessness of a man who knew this answer mattered more than any apology. Adrian opened his mouth. Nothing came. Beatrice waited. She had waited half her life for men to discover that silence could also be an answer. At last, he said, "I don't know." "No," she said. "You do know. You only dislike the shape of it." His shoulders sank. "I might have delayed. I might have tried to persuade myself longer. But I did not love you as I should have. You did not need to love me to spare me public shame." His face went pale. "No, I did not." That, finally, was the apology's first honest bone. Beatrice leaned back. "You ask to explain what had been done to us both." Adrian looked at her with an almost boyish desperation. "It was done around me as well. Lord Vale's debts, Seraphina's manipulation, Lady Octavia's encouragement. I was used. You were used because you were willing to be flattered." He absorbed that with visible pain. "Yes, and because you liked being wanted more than you cared whether I was safe." He looked at Lucian then, perhaps expecting triumph. Lucian gave him none. That may have wounded Adrian more deeply. "I came to ask what I can do. You can stop asking me to make your remorse meaningful." Before he could answer, a disturbance moved through the hall. Not loud. Wycliffe's servants were too well trained for loudness. It was a tightening of voices, a footman's controlled objection, the butler's firm refusal pressed against a woman's insistence. Lucian turned toward the open doors. The butler appeared rigid with displeasure. "Your Grace," he said to Lucian, "Miss Seraphina Rowe and Lady Octavia Fenwick are at the door. They insist the matter concerns the honour of both houses." Adrian's head snapped up. "No." Beatrice looked at him. "Did you tell them you were coming?" "No, I swear it." The butler hesitated. "There is more, Your Grace. One of the younger footmen from Carrington House was seen lingering in the square earlier. When questioned, he left in haste." Adrian's face changed from confusion to cold recognition. "She had me watched." Lady Maud set down her cup. "Of course she did. A woman who arranges scenes rarely trusts actors to wander unsupervised." Lucian looked at Beatrice. "Do you wish them turned away?" For one breath, she imagined it. A closed door. Peace. The luxury of refusing another performance. Then she saw Adrian's face, stripped now of the protection he had spent on Seraphina, and she understood that this was not interruption. It was proof arriving in silk. "Receive them," she said. "Leave the doors open." Seraphina entered as if dignity had injured her but failed to defeat her. She wore white muslin with a blue ribbon at the waist. Innocence softened into costume. Lady Octavia followed in dark green, severe and satisfied. Seraphina looked first at Adrian. "You came here without me." "I came to apologize," he said. "For what?" she whispered. "For believing you." The color moved beneath her skin, then vanished into wounded surprise. "I see." "She has turned you." Beatrice rose. "No, he has only begun turning toward what was always in front of him." Lady Octavia's fan opened with a snap. "This is unseemly. A gentleman calls upon a married woman scarcely a day after scandal, and now Miss Rowe is to be treated as the criminal." "No one said criminal," Lucian said. "Your choice of word is interesting." Lady Octavia's eyes narrowed. Seraphina clasped her hands. "I won't stand here while my reputation is shredded by a marriage made in darkness." "My marriage," Beatrice said, "has a license, a rector, witnesses, and a register." "And a carriage waiting," Seraphina said. "A chapel waiting. A rector roused before midnight. A ring ready." It was all too smooth for innocence. Adrian turned slowly toward her. "How do you know the rector was waiting?" Seraphina's mouth parted. For the first time since Beatrice had known her, the mask did not immediately supply the right expression. "Everyone knows." "London knew by breakfast," Beatrice said. "Not while the chapel candles were still burning." Lady Octavia stepped forward. "Servants talk." "Which servant?" Lucian asked. "From which house?" "At what hour?" "You interrogate women now," Lady Octavia said. "Only when they bring accusations into my house and expect upholstery to make them respectable." Lady Maud gave a satisfied hum. Seraphina looked at Adrian again. Her eyes filled beautifully. "I was frightened. I knew she would try to punish me. I knew Wycliffe would seize the chance to make you look dishonorable." "I made myself dishonorable," Adrian said. The words seemed to stun him as much as her. Seraphina's tears did not fall. They held bright and useful. "You don't mean that." "I do." Beatrice watched the moment carefully. Seraphina had not come because she feared accusation. She had come because the man she had staged a ballroom to win was beginning to speak without her script. Lady Octavia turned to Beatrice. "Your Grace may enjoy triumph today, but society will still ask whether a woman who marries before midnight was rescued or used. Then society may ask me in a room where answers have witnesses," Beatrice said. Lucian moved away from the mantel and stood where all could see him. "Tomorrow at noon, Carrington House will receive those witnesses. The Dowager Duchess of Carrington, Lord Vale, Mr. Alton, Lady Maud, and persons of sufficient standing to carry truth farther than rumour. This will end where it began." Seraphina's face tightened. "You can't summon society like a servant." "No," Lucian said. "But truth has its own invitation, and curiosity is rarely late." Adrian looked toward Beatrice, ashamed and afraid in equal measure. Lady Octavia closed her fan. "You will regret making this public." Beatrice looked at the open doors, the watching hall beyond, and the man beside her who had not once spoken over her answer. "No," she said, "I regretted silence. Tomorrow no one will speak for me." Lucian's gaze met hers, dark and steady. "No," he said, "they will listen." At noon, Carrington House opened the same drawing room, that had tried to dress betrayal as romance, and this time the room had no music to hide behind. Chairs had been placed in measured rows, not enough to make a court, and too many to pretend at family intimacy. The Dowager Duchess of Carrington sat near the hearth, pale but upright, her hands clasped so tightly that her rings pressed into her gloves. Adrian stood behind her chair, with the exhausted stillness of a man who had finally learned that shame could not be delegated. Lord Vale occupied a place near the windows, his face polished into disdain. Seraphina Rowe sat beside Lady Octavia Fenwick, dressed in white again, though the colour no longer looked innocent. Lady Maud had taken the chair nearest Beatrice, and looked ready to object to civilization at the smallest provocation, Mr. Alton stood by a small table where Beatrice had placed the cracked pearl comb, the violet note, the scarlet thread, the anonymous warning, and a copy of her mother's codicil. Around them sat a few witnesses whose names could carry truth farther than gossip. 2 matrons known for strict propriety, an elderly baronet who owed favours to no one present, and the rector of St. Anselm's Chapel, summoned not for drama, but for accuracy. Lucian stood beside the table, several steps from Beatrice, close enough to shield, far enough to leave her visible. He began because the room would accept facts from a duke before it permitted a woman to speak without interruption. Carrington House hosted an injury 2 nights ago, he said. Today it will host the evidence that injury was not an accident of sentiment. Lady Octavia's fan opened, a rather theatrical beginning. Lucian looked at her. I have adapted to the company. Lady Maud made a pleased sound, but Beatrice did not smile. Seraphina lowered her eyes. I came because I was told my honour required it. Your honour, Beatrice said, has required a great deal of attendance since mine was attacked. Seraphina's face lifted with wounded brightness. I never attacked you. Then the evidence will comfort you. Mr. Alton placed the violet note on the table. Lucian did not touch it. This note was delivered to Her Grace within minutes of Carrington's public announcement. It reads, Before midnight, no one will remember you were ever his bride. A murmur passed through the witnesses. Seraphina's hands folded tighter. Anyone could have written that. Indeed, Beatrice said, that is why we did not stop at handwriting. Mr. Alton placed the scarlet thread beside the note. This thread was found caught beneath a loosened prong in the pearl comb worn by Her Grace that evening. Miss Rowe wore scarlet and was seen near Her Grace before the announcement. Scarlet silk is not a confession, Lady Octavia said. No, Lucian answered. But a loosened comb, a staged entrance, a note promising erasure, and a later false implication begin to resemble design. Seraphina rose halfway. False? How dare you? I was frightened and alone. Adrian spoke before Lucian could. His voice was rough. You never said it plainly. Seraphina turned to him. Adrian. No, he said. Not this time. You implied a delicate condition. You let me believe honor required public action. When I asked directly afterward, you wept and gave me uncertainty instead of answer. The Dowager Duchess closed her eyes briefly, but did not stop him. Beatrice saw the cost in her face. That cost mattered. It did not excuse. Seraphina pressed a hand to her heart. I was protecting myself. By destroying another woman, Beatrice said. Don't make cruelty sound like shelter. Lord Vale stepped forward. Enough. This is indecent. Miss Rowe's conduct, whatever its defects, does not justify dragging my late wife's papers into a drawing room. Your late wife's papers, Mr. Alton said carefully, are here because they prove. Her Grace was denied property and legal independence that should have been disclosed. He placed the copied codicil on the table. The Countess of Vale left her daughter the pearls, the comb made from them, and an independent portion upon marriage or upon appointment of her own solicitor. Lord Vale's mouth hardened. Managed for family necessity, Beatrice looked at him. Hidden for family debt. You know nothing of necessity. I know what it looks like when a father calls his daughter's silence an asset. The elderly baronet shifted in his chair. One of the matrons looked sharply at Lord Vale, no longer with curiosity but judgment. Lady Octavia saw the movement and tried to reclaim the room. Even if Lord Vale handled matters poorly, that has no bearing on the moral irregularity of a midnight marriage. Reverend Pike stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable, but not uncertain. The marriage at St. Anselm's Chapel was entered freely. I asked Her Grace directly whether she consented. Lady Maud Harrow was present. His Grace the Duke of Wycliffe was not permitted to proceed until the terms were understood. Lady Octavia's eyes narrowed. And yet Miss Rowe knew a rector was waiting. The words escaped too quickly. The room turned. Lady Maud leaned on her cane. Did she? Lady Octavia's fan stopped. Seraphina went still. Beatrice said nothing. Silence drew the answer closer than accusation could have done. Adrian looked at Seraphina. You knew it yesterday at Wycliffe House. You spoke of the rector, the carriage, the timing, how Seraphina's composure trembled, then tried to repair itself. Servants talk. Lucian's voice remained level. The rector had spoken to no servant from Carrington House. My coachman did not leave the carriage. Lady Maud did not send word. The only person outside that chapel who knew enough to repeat the sequence was someone who followed or had the movement watched. Seraphina's eyes flashed toward Lady Octavia. It was only a glance. It was enough. Lady Octavia rose. I will not be made responsible for a frightened young woman's confusion. One of the matrons, Lady Whitmore, spoke for the first time. You were very confident this morning that the Wycliffe marriage was suspect. More confident than rumor alone should allow. The second matron added, and less cautious than kindness required. Lady Octavia's face tightened as if she had been struck by etiquette itself. Lucian looked at Beatrice. Her Grace is not finished. The room obeyed him because it had to. Beatrice stepped to the table and picked up the cracked comb. This belonged to my mother. Miss Rowe's thread was caught in it, because someone wished me to appear disordered when Adrian made his announcement. My father kept my mother's codicil from me, because dependence made me useful. Lady Octavia repeated suspicion, because suspicion is easier than justice when the accused woman is quiet. And Adrian chose to believe the performance that flattered him. Adrian bowed his head. Seraphina whispered, You had everything, a name, a father, a duke willing to marry you before dawn. What did I have? Beatrice looked at her without hatred. Hatred would have made Seraphina larger than she deserved. You had wit, beauty, and enough understanding of cruelty to aim it accurately. You used all three against another woman and called it survival. Seraphina's tears came then, not graceful enough to persuade. I couldn't let him retreat into duty. If he married you, I would be nothing again. So you made me nothing first. The sentence ended the softness in the room. Lord Vale tried once more. This has become emotional nonsense, mister. Alton turned to him. The restitution of Her Grace's portion will proceed through formal channels. Refusal will require explanation in places less private than this room. Lord Vale's expression curdled. You threaten an earl? Lucian answered. No. We document one. The elderly baronet gave a small, decisive nod. Lord Vale saw it and understood that his version of events had lost its first witness. Adrian moved away from his mother's chair and faced the room. His voice was unsteady, but he did not retreat. Lady Beatrice Vale did nothing dishonorable. The Duchess of Wycliffe did nothing dishonorable. I ended our engagement publicly. I allowed implication to stand where truth should have been demanded. I mistook desire for courage and humiliation for honesty. The dishonor was mine. The words did not heal Beatrice. They restored the public record. That was enough for this room. The Dowager Duchess covered her mouth, then lowered her hand. I will not contradict my son, she said. Nor will Carrington House. Seraphina stared at Adrian as if he had broken a bargain by becoming honest. Lady Octavia gathered her gloves. I see this room has chosen its entertainment. Lady Whitmore stood. No, Lady Octavia, it has chosen its witnesses. The other matron rose with her. Neither curtsied to Lady Octavia before moving toward Beatrice. The consequence was quiet, precise, and devastating. Doors would close later, because these women had already closed their eyes to Lady Octavia's authority. Beatrice placed the comb back on the linen. I do not ask anyone to pity me. I asked that the truth be repeated with the same energy as the lie. I was not abandoned because I lacked worth. I was not married because I lacked sense. I was not silent because I lacked pain. I was silent because silence was demanded, and I have finished paying that price. No applause followed. Applause would have cheapened it. Instead, the witnesses bowed, one by one, to Beatrice. Not to Lucian, not to the scandal, to her. Serafina left with Lady Octavia, white gown rigid around a body that had lost its audience. Lord Vale left last, after Miss Alton reminded him of the accounting. Adrian bowed to Beatrice at the door, and did not ask forgiveness. That restraint was the first decent thing he had done without reward. When the room emptied, Carrington House seemed smaller. The chandeliers still glittered. The portraits still watched. Yet, the house no longer owned the story it had tried to begin. Beatrice stood beside the table, tired beyond tears and steadier than triumph. Lucian came to her only after the last witness had gone. "You did not need me," he said. No, his face did not fall. Good. She looked at him then, and the cracked part of her heart felt neither hidden nor exposed, only seen. "But I was glad you were there." Something in his restraint gave way, not fully, but enough for tenderness to enter his eyes. "Beatrice," he said, and her name sounded like a door opened from inside. "When this scandal has finished using our names, will you still wish to keep the chapel promise?" She looked at the comb, the codicil, the room where truth had finally been forced to stand upright. "Ask me somewhere no one has arranged for me," she said. "Then I will answer as myself." 3 weeks after Carrington House was forced to surrender the story it had tried to own, Beatrice stood before the East Room mirror at Wycliffe Hall in Kent and lifted her mother's pearl comb into the morning light. The cracked pearl had not been replaced. That was the first thing she noticed, and the first thing that made her breathe more easily. A lesser goldsmith might have hidden the break beneath polish or substituted a flawless pearl as if perfection were kinder than memory. Lucian had chosen otherwise. A fine seam of gold now ran through the fracture, delicate as sunlight caught in a wound. The pearl remained cracked. It also held. Beatrice touched it with one bare finger and felt no shame in the uneven surface. "It's beautiful, Your Grace," Martha said from behind her, with the quiet confidence of a young maid who no longer expected kindness to vanish without warning. Beatrice met her eyes in the glass. "Yes, it is." Martha smiled, then caught herself as if happiness might be too informal for a duchess's chamber. Beatrice let her see the answer in her own face. Permission could be given without words, and Martha understood. Wycliffe Hall had learned Beatrice slowly, and she had learned it in return. Its old stone walls did not glitter like Carrington House. Its corridors held the scent of beeswax, cedar, and rain on distant fields. The servants had begun to come to her with questions rather than fears. The housekeeper had placed household keys in her hand 2 days after their arrival, then looked startled when Beatrice asked the names of the youngest scullery maids before issuing instructions. Lady Maud had installed herself in a sunny sitting room, declared Kent acceptable when London became overpopulated with fools, and that very morning had told Beatrice, "Family is an inconvenient word, but you've made yourself difficult to exclude." It was the nearest Lady Maud would come to affection before luncheon. It was more than enough. Consequence had settled in London, with less noise than scandal, but greater permanence. Serafina Rowe had left town, under the protection of an aunt, suddenly remembered by everyone who wished to remove her without discussing her. Lady Octavia Fenwick still received cards, but fewer were returned, and her sharp remarks no longer travelled with the old obedience. Lord Vale had signed what the solicitor required him to sign after 3 interviews, 2 denials, and 1 letter from Lucian that contained no threat and therefore frightened him more. Beatrice's portion had been restored. Her mother's pearls had been acknowledged as hers. Adrian Winslow remained Duke of Carrington, because society forgave rank more easily than character, but his name now carried a pause. That pause would follow him into every ballroom where he had once expected admiration to arrive first. Beatrice had not celebrated any of it. Justice had not tasted sweet. It had tasted clean, like air, after a closed room had finally been opened. A knock sounded at the chamber door. Martha opened it and immediately dipped a curtsy. Not with fear, but with pleasure she tried to hide. Lucian stood in the passage, dressed for travel in a dark coat, his hat in one hand and his gloves in the other. His gaze went first to Beatrice's face. Only then did it move to the comb in her hair. That order mattered to her. It always had. The goldsmith understood, he said. He understood because you told him. I told him not to erase what had survived. Beatrice turned from the mirror. Was that instruction about the comb? His mouth softened. Not entirely. Martha suddenly discovered that a ribbon near the wardrobe required intense attention. Beatrice held Lucian's gaze. The quiet between them had changed since the chapel, since the drawing room, since the night when his carriage became a door. At first, silence with him had felt like caution. Now it felt like space. Are we going to St. Anselm's? She asked. Only if you still wish it. I told you to ask me somewhere no one had arranged for me. Yes, and you chose the chapel where we were married by. Contingency? I chose the place where contingency can be answered. The answer was very Lucian, exact, restrained, dangerous to the heart because it trusted her to understand. She reached for her gloves. Then let us answer it. Lady Maud insisted upon accompanying them to London, and then refused to enter the chapel. I witnessed the emergency portion, she said from the carriage window, when they stopped before St. Anselm's in the afternoon light. I shall not intrude upon the voluntary portion unless somebody behaves foolishly. Reverend Pike opened the chapel himself. He smiled with visible relief when he saw Beatrice's face. There was no hurry now, no midnight, no Adrian at the door, no father waiting to turn her future into settlement. The chapel was exactly as small as she remembered, but daylight had changed it. Dust glowed in the air above the pews. The altar cloth was plain. The stone floor held no echo of panic now, only memory. Beatrice walked to the place where she had stood in her ball gown and stopped. Lucian remained beside her, not before her. I did not love you that night, she said. I know, I was frightened. I know, I was angry with you. You had cause. I may be angry with you again. I expect it. She looked at him. You sound almost comforted. I am comforted by honesty. It gives a man fewer places to hide. That drew a laugh from her, small but true. The sound moved through the chapel and did not break anything. Lucian watched her, as if the sound had been entrusted to him. When did you know? She asked. That I wanted the marriage to become more than the terms. His gaze lowered to her hands, then returned to her face. When you refused to beg, I understood your courage. When you protected Martha, I trusted your power. When you chose witnesses over silence, I knew I would rather stand beside your truth than be admired anywhere else. Beatrice's throat tightened. You make it sound as if I saved myself. You did, you helped. Yes, you are allowed to admit that. I did not wish to confuse help with ownership. She stepped closer. You have never done that. Only slightly. With Lucian, feeling appeared first in restraint, as if the deepest part of him approached the world carefully, because it knew the cost of force. Beatrice, he said, I will ask plainly now. Not as a duke needing a duchess. Not as a man defending a decision made under scandal. Will you keep the chapel promise because you wish to, not because it protects you? She looked toward the altar, where she had once said I will, with a heart full of smoke and calculation. Then she touched the gold-mended comb in her hair. I came here once because the road behind me was closing. Today I came because the road ahead is open, and I choose the person walking it with me. His eyes darkened with an emotion too disciplined to spill, but too strong to hide. Then I will make my promise again. So will I. Reverend Pike, who had been pretending not to listen from a respectful distance, cleared his throat. There is no legal need, Your Graces, Lady Maud's voice carried from the half-open door. There is rarely a legal need for the best things, Mr. Pike. Proceed with whatever dignity you can gather. Beatrice laughed again, and even Lucian smiled this time. They did not repeat the full ceremony. They did not need to. They stood before the plain altar and spoke only what had been missing the first time. Lucian took her ungloved hand. I won't ask you to be grateful for being treated as you always deserved. I won't ask you to forget what brought you here. I won't ask you to be smaller, because loving a woman with a voice requires humility. I will listen before I decide. I will stand beside you before I stand before you. I will make our name a shelter, not a cage. Beatrice closed her fingers around his, and I won't call fear obedience anymore. I won't hide pain to make rooms comfortable. I won't mistake protection for love unless it leaves me free. I will stay because I choose you, Lucian, not because you rescued me. Because when others arranged my silence, you made space for my voice. He bent over her hand, not with possession, but reverence, and touched his lips to her knuckles for one quiet second. Then I am yours by choice, he said. And I am yours by choice, she answered. Outside, London continued with its carriages, gossip, ambitions, and polished cruelties, but none of it entered the chapel. When Beatrice and Lucian stepped back into daylight, Lady Maud examined their faces and gave a decisive nod. Good, no one looks sacrificed. We may return to Kent. Martha would be waiting at Wycliffe Hall. The East Room keys would lie on Beatrice's desk. Letters from the solicitor would come and be answered in her own hand. The house would ask for her judgment, not her silence. Lucian offered his arm. This time Beatrice took it without needing escape, balance, or witnesses. As the carriage drew away from St. Anselm's, she touched the comb mended with gold and felt the seam beneath her fingers. The crack remained. So did the light. She had entered that chapel once, as a woman escaping a night designed to erase her. She left it now beside the man who had learned to love her, standing upright in the morning. She was no longer the bride rescued before midnight. She was the duchess who chose the dawn.